Welcome back to the Nullified Take, but we've got the TNT takes for you on Survivor, and I've got a very special guest, probably the biggest guest I would say I've ever had on the podcast so far. But in case you've lived under a rock for the last couple of years, I've got with me Shannon Guss, who is someone that is well known within the international Survivor community. She is now a consultant to the production team of Survivor South Africa. She does some podcasting work for RHAP, for Survivor Global, and also she actually works on the Talking Tribal show, which is the official after show for Australian Survivor over in Australia. Shannon, welcome to the podcast. It's so great to have you.
Oh my God, thank you so much for that introduction. I feel like that all sounds not right, that I'm your biggest guest or that I'm that important or anything. I don't feel that way, but it was still lovely words to hear. So thank you so much. That was so beautiful to hear.
Oh, well, I'm a big fan. I listened to yourself and Mike Bloom for years before I even had the courage to pick up the mic myself and even, talk about the show. And for the longest period of time, I was like the ultimate closet Survivor fan. Like nobody knew I was a Survivor fan. I didn't have family or friends who watched it. So when I started doing the podcast, it was like kind of like ripping the Band-Aid off and just telling everybody, hey, I'm a Survivor fan. And now I've got so many great friends that I can talk to about this game that we both love.
Yeah, it's like, I've got this really embarrassing secret. I am a Survivor fan. But no, I'm really glad that you are, doing this, because I think that it really is amazing to do your own thing, all the stuff that you're doing. I was saying to you a little bit before the podcast, but to really go out on your own and create a community. Like, you didn't have friends who watched it, so you created your own community of, fans who want to watch you. And I think that that's an incredible thing. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about International Survivor with you.
Yeah, so I guess to start it off, we're talking for those that are listening to the audio version or even watching this on my channel on YouTube for the Nullified Take. We're going to be talking about Survivor, I guess, worldwide, or like I like to call it, Survivor Worlds Collide, because we are going to be talking about a potential crossover season. And for the longest period of time, I feel like super fans have been wanting this type of season, people that watch all of the versions of the show. How likely do you think, Shannon, we are to actually get something like this in the future? Do you think that this is just a pipe dream for many of us? Do you think that this is legitimately something that may happen in our lifetime?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could happen. I really do. I feel like, firstly, LaRue, who produces Survivor South Africa, is such a super fan. All super fans want the season. So LaRue wants the season. Whether he can make it happen, that's his own thing. But like, that's definitely something I think he would want to do, that Survivor South Africa would be like basically fangirling over. I also asked JLP when I did an interview with him, I think before Brains versus Brawn. I was like, hey, why aren't you doing this? They brought on Russell at the time. They subsequently also brought on Sandra and Nina. So they had that international flavor there. He was very much like, as I was like, what about like South Africa versus Australia versus US? He was like, yeah, US versus Australia. I'm like, and South Africa? He's like, US versus Australia. So I think that basically the US will never do it. They don't like to acknowledge that internationals exist. Maybe it's because they can sometimes be a little better. It's probably just because they don't see it. Can kind of be an American viewpoint, and the US is obviously the OG and the biggest. So they see us, I think, as just like a little bit on the side. So they're never going to do it. Australia, I think, could do it, but it wouldn't include South Africa. You basically each franchise has to build up. Like, they'd never invite franchises as they see as smaller or like below them. So Australia could invite US, and I actually think maybe we'll want to do that one day, because I think as well, Australia is the most international place for Survivor right now. It's the only place you can watch all the franchises. It's all on 10 play. They have that world of Survivor that they're happening. It's something they try to incorporate into Talking Tribal. They encourage me to talk about Survivor South Africa or US Survivor. It's on their platform. It's on Paramount Plus. So they want people to be watching it. So I think Australia would be keen for it. I just don't know if South Africa would be included. Maybe because it's on 10 play now, it's something that they would want to do. But I think they'd be looking more at the US. And then I think South Africa would love to do with all three of the franchises and really do like a War of the Worlds thing. And I think they do it amazingly well. So I honestly have hope, and maybe it's because I'm an optimistic person, but I really have hope that this will happen in my lifetime. No, in the next like few years, I have hope that one of Australia or South Africa will do an international season in some capacity.
Well, I was going to say there's a few things that happened in our lifetime that nobody thought would happen. Tony Vlachos won the title twice.
Oh my God. I'm like, yeah, like Tony winning. That's the first one that I could. You vote Tony winning twice. I thought you were going to say like something like world news, but I was like, Tony.
Like, listen,
See, this is why I'm glad we're doing this.
Me and you are like both the biggest Tony Vlachos stans. I know you're a big stan of his as well. But, Tony Vlachos won twice. We had a Winners at War season that people thought would never going to happen. And now we've got a post-merge versus pre-merge season happening in South Africa that a lot of people thought would never happen as well. So I feel like with the work, like I've always thought, Leroux would obviously be someone that would want to do something like this. It's just the question, do they have the budget? Can they attract international players and also provide them with prize money at the end of it that is going to be appetizing for US players to come and participate in? I've always had my hopes on Australia to do that. And I feel like with all the marketing material now, they had Chappies recently for Survivor Worldwide as the face of Survivor South Africa. I feel like they're putting in a lot of like marketing to like subconsciously get fans ready for it. And I feel like one of the biggest struggles that you have with getting like an international season off the ground is that if you go to the US, 80 or 90% of the people there will not know who the international Survivor players are. But if you go to Australia, there's a higher likelihood that they'll know all of the US players or most of them. And also now the later seasons of Survivor South Africa, like you said, is on 10 play. So I agree with you. I feel like, Australia might be our hope, but I'm also having my fingers crossed because if I had to decide which one of the production teams would I like to actually handle this, I think Survivor South Africa, and I'm biased, I'm a South African originally. I've lived in New Zealand for a long time, but still have my South African roots. I do think that the production team in South Africa is top notch. And I know you're going to be biased because you're now part of that team.
Yeah. I'm biased because I work on Survivor South Africa. I'm originally South African. I feel like I should have these like shifted biases. I am Australian now, have been for 20 years. I'm from South Africa, but I work on Survivor South Africa, but I am employed by Channel 10. And then US is the OG. Like I should probably not show extreme biases, but I feel like I do in every direction. I would love for Survivor South Africa to do this. Like, I think they're the most likely to do it across the countries. Although, again, Australia, US, I think it's something they could definitely do. Although they should really do South Africa. They're investing in it. They have it on 10 play, but I think they'll try and keep it on Channel 10 as, like, US. People that they think that the casual Australian audience, not necessarily some people that are logging on to 10 play and watching even Talking Tribal where we talk about it, or the Survivor South Africa seasons, they feel like, okay, but this player from the US. So that's something that's possible. But I would love for Survivor South Africa not just being the most likely to do it across the franchises, but I think that they would be the best. And again, is it that bias? But we'd be back to 39 days. That would feel right across like this kind of like classic War of the Worlds thing. The twist, I think, would be the most comfortable for me, kind of watching them all play against, extreme non-elims and stuff. It wouldn't really feel right against this like kind of global universal season, and they just would do it the best. I think they cast really well. We'd get like really great thought out picks from across the countries rather than just like not saying that Russell and Sandra are bad. It was incredible to have Sandra in particular, but I think like if Australia's doing it, like they're picking the Boston Robs of the world, and I think if South Africa's doing it, it might be more the picks that we're going to talk about. Also because I would give them that advice, but Leroux doesn't need the advice. They'd be going with like we'll talk about it when we get to the cast, but people that are really involved in the international community when they're thinking of stuff like the US and even for Australia. So I think they do it really well, and I hope that they get to do it one day.
Yeah, I think it's interesting with Australian Survivor having had Sandra, having had Russell, and then also Nina, obviously being an American that have played the game in Australia as well. I feel like they're dipping their toes into that world just to see how does the Australian public feel about Americans playing the game over in Australia. So I do think that that's a very, very big likelihood. Now, we're kind of tiptoeing around it, but one of the questions I have for you and something that I'm very interested in is if we did have this crossover season, like we're just going to ignore everything, like anything is possible. Everything is possible.
Yeah.
I didn't even put
one twice. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I didn't even put limits on like, hey, you should pick a cast based on X, Y, or Z, because I wanted us to both come in here with our own picks, and then hopefully we've got even different. It would be great for us not to have exactly the same players, because then we give love to more players, and I found it hard to be honest to pick the players to begin with. But one of the things I think that would be interesting is thinking about who would be the perfect host, and how would you sort of look at that, because we've got three very different hosts. I actually don't look at Jeff as a host anymore, so in my opinion I wouldn't want him as the host, because I feel like he's kind of moved beyond being a host myself. So for me it will be more like between JLP and Nico, probably for an international season, to have that true international vibe.
Yeah, just to touch on something you just said a couple of minutes ago, I also wanted to say, like you said, that they're dipping their toe into it and seeing how the audience reacted. I don't feel like the audience was super into, like the casual audience was into the Americans. Like obviously the super fans were obsessed with having Sandra, and it was like truly an honor for us all. But the casuals were like very anti-Sandra when she's like the queen. They didn't understand that she was the queen, and they felt that she was arrogant, and there might have been some demographic stuff there where, you know, maybe the Australian audience has a little bit to answer for. But there was like a weird nationalism. I mean, Russell brought that on himself. I feel like after that season, everyone was like, and stay out, you know, like he kind of like went to war with Australia. Maybe that was more of a him thing, but I feel like they weren't very into it and very much like, why are these Americans here? More, you know, everyday Aussies should get a shot, which was strange. I feel like South Africa, from the little I understand about the audience watching it, they're into the international franchises. So they like love Australian Survivor there, and it gets played over there. And when I did my interviews for last season before Immunity Island, everyone loved David and had watched him and was very, very into it. So I feel like they as well like have watched the US. So they're maybe a little bit more open to it than Australia strangely has been. But in terms of host, I mean, Jeff is the OG. Like if you're going all the way up to the US, you think Jeff, but then I feel like it should be like a South African production, so Nico. But then JLP is like my favorite host. Again, I just show my extreme biases. Is it sitting on a fence to be in this like, again, dream Tony Won Twice world that we get all three? Because that's and I don't think it's something we could do. But if like in a world where we can do anything, if they're all standing there and then one does one challenge and one does a tribal and some they all do together, that to me would feel right because it's like worlds colliding and it would be colliding for them too.
Yeah, I like that idea. And in fact, I wrote it down, I think, before we came onto the podcast that for me, JLP is the best host at challenges. I really enjoy him at the challenges. He really gets into it. And the way that he sort of, you know, banter with players that are there, he kind of gets involved in a really good way. I actually, and I don't know if this is a bit of a hot take, I really like Nico for Tribal Council. I like how he handles Tribal Council. I like how he lets things play out. He doesn't get too involved at times where JLP can sometimes be guilty, I feel like, of maybe getting too involved or
he's been better recently,
yeah,
but he's definitely, people have criticized that.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing obviously with Jeff is like I grew up watching Jeff. I think it was like 12 or something when Survivor first started, and I've been a fan. To answer your question about South Africans, obviously I lived in South Africa until I was 18 before I left, and I grew up watching Survivor there, and it was a massive part of my life. It was big in South Africa, especially in those early years, and now you get, I guess, castaways that are playing the game this year, and they're getting like messages from international Survivor players, just to give you an idea as to how much players already know about these international players. So I like that idea, like the idea of getting different people involved. Now, last thing here before we start thinking, or maybe two things still that I want to sort of explore before we start getting into the cast. Firstly, location-wise, do you have like a preference in regards to location? I've been very anti staying in Fiji for as long as the main shows stayed because I just feel like it's getting stale and the backdrop is still the same. It was beautiful to see it in season 41 because we had 2 seasons away for us that watched Australia and Survivor South Africa, and then it went back to Fiji. It was actually quite refreshing. But do you have other locations in mind that you think would be awesome, like past locations that they maybe filmed in before?
I really love them doing it in Australia. Because I feel that location just seems really hardcore. I think some of the internationals might straight up die. So that would be the issue. But it obviously goes back to the roots of Australian Outback, like the most watched US season. So there's that little bit there. My concern is that if we have like a very cultural location, and that kind of starts to define the season a little bit and really, you know, be a feature of it, then is it getting a little tricky with the fact that it's like worlds collide and there's all these different nationalities and then there's a location on top of it. Whereas maybe if it's Australia, I mean, maybe the home soil thing's kind of unfair. Maybe if it's produced by Australia, that would make a little bit more sense. But I think it's a really cool location. And if you're not going to do that, I do think you kind of have to be in something like Fiji, which feels like at this point to the location of Survivor, more generic, more maybe streamlined, and you can focus more on the theme and like these battling nationalities rather than going to like some cool location like they've done before with China was amazing, Tocantins, etc. But then that becomes its own feature when we've already like kind of getting distracted by so much else, because you kind of want these features of each, like the best features, hopefully, of each franchise. Like you talk about how JLP is the best in the challenges. Well, people complain sometimes that the match chat goes too far, but it's very much a feature of Australian Survivor to have these like extensive match chats. So that's something that he could do. Is the location something that's key to Australia, but then we have other facets that are key to like these other franchises. So it wouldn't just be cast that I would want to collide. I would want it. That's why I like the idea of sharing hosts. I would want to collide other components of the franchises in host, in location, in features, in twists as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, maybe something like Australia, or otherwise maybe just stay really boring and stay in Fiji.
Well, funny enough, if we're going back to Australia, I feel like, I didn't cast this person, but then we should have like a Colby or like a Tina
Yeah,
so that
that's
they go back to the
interesting.
Outback. It would have been a pretty cool
I don't know.
throwback to
There's
that.
not a lot of Australian outback people who can come back for various reasons. So yeah, someone like
Yeah.
Colby, who knows? I mean, Colby wouldn't want to. You can't get Elizabeth Hassel back. Wow, that's of all the seasons we would really want to pull from. They've done so many of them, and it would be very, very tricky
I feel
to
like you would
kind of
have to
find someone.
like get one of those OG Outback players back for a season such
Mm,
as that. But one of the things you mentioned, and we didn't get into that, and I'll tell you my location that I would like for it to play out in. But one of the things that we didn't talk about was you mentioned different aspects from different franchises that we want to use. And I think one of the things I want to give, like I've been critical of Australian Survivor in the last 2 seasons. For me, the quality of the show isn't where it has been, and a lot of that has got to do with the fact that the edit has become too predictable. Both seasons I predicted who the winner was going to be in the second episode, and I knew straight throughout. It was very obvious. I wouldn't want the Australian editing department to touch this season because I feel
yeah.
like it would just be
Yeah.
too obvious. But one of the things I do like about Australia Survivor, and it's so far ahead of any of the other franchises, would be the challenges. Like I would want them to create the challenges. I would want them. There needs to be a little bit more balance. I feel like with puzzles and things like that, they don't focus too much on that.
But the
But I
scope,
do.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
and I mean, like you said, some of the US players might die based on the physicality of some of the challenges that Australia does. But like in broad brush, I'd love for them to look at the challenges. The editing department for the US these last 2 seasons, and specifically this last season, 10 out of 10, like this last season. They gave everybody an opportunity. If you're going to bring back so many legendary players, you want them to be able to, voice themselves, and we want to have fun with them in the show and actually have to go on that journey. I always look back at Ethan Zahn when he got voted out, which was such an emotional vote. I know it was one for you as well, because I still listened to your recaps back then. No one saw it coming because the edit was so bad, but they really fixed it from there onwards. I feel like they're getting better. And then for Survivor South Africa, like you said, just the whole theme of the season, what kind of game mechanics is going to be in it, I would trust them most with that. So those type of different things. Is there anything else that I kind of miss out on that you think like would be great for one of the three franchises to sort of take care of in the season such as that?
I mean, in terms of an edit perspective, I do think Australian Survivor can stay far away, but I do think that the epicness and
Yes.
that kind of grandeur, I would bring that. Production format, South Africa, and then like I also would trust South Africa with the edit, but we have to give US something. So if their editors want to work on it more in the vein of like 41, like not 41 because Erica's edit wasn't amazing. 42, the edit was beautiful, perfect edit,
Yeah.
invested in the characters. And the thing with the US in terms of the editing being so impressive is obviously that they have the least time, and when they do it right and they can tell those stories, that's incredibly impressively done. So yeah, if they want to do that and even maybe get a little bit more time, I'd also do the old school, like what is going to be old school compared to SA9, but 55-minute episodes as South Africa's been doing, maybe 16 to 18 episodes. I've really enjoyed them kind of sitting in that time, and maybe give the US a little bit of extra time and seeing what the editors can do. So yeah, I kind of feel like we can pull from all of those things and get the best of the best. But more puzzles if Australian Survivor is going to do the challenges, but they are epic for sure.
Yeah, I feel like Leroux or whoever's in charge of the editing, they just sit there and really enjoy making us podcast this looks like fools when we're trying to get like the winner edit. Because I mean, we've had 2 seasons in recent times where I was completely blown out of the water. I could, in hindsight, understand why they won, but watching
Yeah.
it the first time around, I think it was a shock, but it's also a pleasant shock where a lot of people sometimes find it refreshing not to know immediately who that person's going to be. I kind of felt like an element of that happened in Survivor 42 as well, where there was a great misdirect with Omar and how well he was playing, and then suddenly Marianne had this rise, which I saw 2 or 3 weeks before she did her move, that she was starting to become a little bit more involved. But I thought they handled that really well as well. So I do like what you're saying there.
Yeah, I mean, South Africa, like they edit without an agenda. They edit as it's happening. So if the winner is being crazy or more low key, they will show it. If there's another person who really feels like a threat, they're gonna really hype that up to the amount that it is. If Rob Bentley is dominating to that extent, you're gonna see it and then he's gonna win. It's basically, I mean, there's always like a little bit obviously of context that has to be given when you're editing down a show, but it's basically a window into what is happening right there. And if it's shocking for the players, it'll be shocking for you rather than needing to kind of smooth out those edges, which the US can do. I mean, we love 42. We love the editing, but we haven't loved a lot of the editing of modern US Survivor and the way the winner edits have been shoved down our throats. So maybe we're just a little bit enamored with the recency bias of 42. Maybe we should give editing to South Africa as well. US can sit there and look pretty. Like, I'm not really sure what US can contribute to this other than their amazing cast members. If Jeff can
their
do
budget,
something like, yeah, their budget. Yeah, that's it. Okay. We'll get the US budget, South Africa on production and editing, and then the grandeur of Australia and the challenges. Okay, that's amazing. Yeah, that's great. And is Jeff going to come do this? Maybe not, but maybe he can send some like selfie videos talking to the camera, and that's where he can come in, be like, hey, we're back. It's an international season. And then JLP can take the challenges and Nico can take the tribal councils, and then all three of them can be there for the reunion and the finale vote read. Brilliant.
Yeah, well, I feel like Jeff in recent seasons have tried to like get more and more involved and like, you know, to try and like influence the game in certain ways because he's been doing it for so long. He wants to be entertained out there on the island himself as well. What if we made Jeff the twist? What if we put him on an island and they get to go talk to the OG host and he gives them advice in regards to how to handle tribal council? This is how you answer Nico's questions if you want to be able to keep your game a secret to him or things like that. We make him a part of the twist. I think that's the perfect balance.
I feel like he would love that, but the fans would not. The fans are trying to like get a little bit less of Jeff rather than him inserting himself into everything. Now he's like a part of the game. Also, the issue is that Jeff would not know these players. Is he going to binge like a ton of international seasons to understand who these people are? Probably not. Like, when would he have the time? And I don't believe he's watched it to this point. Whereas I feel like Nico's probably seen it all, right? Have these hosts even watched, like, has JLP watched South Africa? I'm not actually sure.
I don't know if JLP does. No, but Nico's some big...
They're going to have to binge.
I think Nico's a big fan as well, isn't he? Like he's watched from memory. He said he's always been a fan of Survivor before he even became the host. So I'm pretty sure if he is a fan, he would have still been watching and keeping up with what's happening. And I just find like the whole South African team are fans in general, and that's why the show just has such a different feeling to it. And you know the excitement is really there for this coming season as well. But coming back to I guess my original thing that I wanted to talk about, the location, and I think that this location probably won't be used unless they ever do a Legends season. It will probably be even more appropriate for that. But you know we can dream. I'd love for them to go back to Borneo where it all started. You know, I just think that it would be such a great throwback, go back to where this craziness happened like 20 plus years now. And it's had so many different franchises that's come from it. And, you know, but if you did go back to that season again, do you include the original winner? What do you do? I feel like that's where they will go with a Legend season, but maybe not, because these days it is all about money and where can they get away the most cost effective. I feel like is the biggest decision maker for the US going back to 26 days, staying in Fiji, all these changes that they're making currently. But I don't want to be just bagging on the show at the moment. There's a few things I don't like, but
yeah. No, I mean, the second that you said they'll only do it for Legend season, I was like, oh, Borneo. And I do kind of love that. I don't think you would necessarily need someone from Borneo. I think the theme would be ingrained to be like, this is where it all began, like 26 years ago, maybe if they do it in a few years. You know, this is where Survivor started. I know that there was other franchises before, but Survivor as a franchise began there. And look what it has evolved to, not just the US show. And this would have to be Jeff saying it, but like, if you're going back to Borneo, then you actually need Jeff involved in some capacity, even if it's just with the speech, for him to say, and, you know, even to say, to go back to what they're not doing, but say 39 days, 24 people, one survivor. But it would basically be the storyline of like, and then flashing back to international versions that have kind of come off the US and how impactful that has been globally. I think that actually would be pretty amazing. I mean, Australia would do it to a degree because it has like obviously the connection to the US franchise and the Australian franchise, but I feel like nothing really compares to Borneo. So I think that could be cool. I could see it now, going through like the history of the show, spawning off into Australia and South Africa. And then now a group of 24 legends would be amazing. Yeah.
So one thing, and I feel like, I don't know how you stand on this season. A lot of people are like 50-50 on it, but I personally loved it. Ghost Island. I love the whole theme of bringing back relics from the past. Obviously, they missed an opportunity by bringing new cast members into that season. I feel like a season like this with people that potentially know the history of the show and also including some of the things that happened internationally into that could be quite interesting as a potential mechanic. How do you sit in regards to that and an homage to what came before? Do you think that is better to just keep that with the US or to never see that type of twist? Do you like the idea of having such I guess, like an island theme? I know Leroux likes bringing in himself things like Immunity Island, Island of Secrets, and things like that, because it just gives the contestants something else to go and do and to go and make a decision at a place that's separate from their tribe. How do you feel about, I guess, something like that on a season such as this?
Yeah, I don't know that I like an island theme for a season like this, because I think it would take over a little bit too much when the cast are the theme in and of itself. Like, they're the twist. I love the homages to the past seasons. Obviously, like, I'm a huge nerd about that stuff. Like, but for me, it can be done in like little details. Like, one of the things I loved about Cambodia was that all the returnees were wearing like a version of the clothes they'd been, and they were all one-time players, so it worked really well to just kind of have them kind of being taken out from that first season into the second. I think there are ways that you can do that and even have twists, and definitely have like external islands at points and have decisions and have twists without it being like a feature of the show, like an Immunity Island or an Island of Secrets, which can work really well with newbies. But I just think doesn't need to be like a staple of the season when that, like, the highlight is the cast and the theme, if that makes sense, rather than it needing to kind of have this dual focus.
100%. Okay, so let's talk about twists you'd like to see in this, like an advantage, and one that you definitely don't want to see. I think we both will probably agree we don't want to see Edge of Extinction, but outside of that, is there something else that you think, this is what I would like to see and this is what I definitely wouldn't like to see in a season such as this?
I wouldn't want any way for the players to be brought back, obviously, whether it's through the Australian non-elims, which if it's run by Australia, definitely will happen, or Redemption Island or Edge of Extinction. None of that. Like, we're here to play, and if not, you are out. One thing I would really like to see, and I know this is like really controversial, and probably I'm in the minority of enjoying this as a twist, but I think it would particularly work for this season, is an early swap. And that's a feature of some seasons that I love, like the last South Africa season, Cambodia. I think with returning seasons, it can work really well, because if there's been any pre-gaming or anything connection like that, I mean, sometimes that can work out worse. Like in Winners at War, like there was one whole pre-game cast, like a whole tribe of them. But I just think that it can kind of keep them on their toes, be like, who's the most flexible in a returnee cast? And importantly, for this season, I think it would be crucial, because I think that if you are already divided in a really stark way by like country and nationality, and there's a little bit of like this like sportsman thing of like we're playing like an international sport, you can kind of cling to those groups a little bit, I feel. And I would hate to see like a post-merge pagonging, because it's like, well, we need an American to win. I kind of feel like they'd really feel that way somehow, or we need like our country to be victorious. So I think like muddying up those connections early, starting kind of those cross-continental relationships from episode 3 or 4, like really early in for me, and multiple swaps. Like, I know that this is something that people really don't enjoy. They get confused, but you'll be less confused because you'll know the players. It's a returning season. And I think that I'm trying to break national instincts and pre-game alliances and just kind of,
Can I add to that?
Can I add to
that? I like the way you're thinking here. I had Russell Muscle TV, also got a YouTube channel, does Survivor content as well. He was a guest of mine in the previous podcast we did. We spoke about Survivor themes, and one of the themes we spoke about that potentially we'd love to see come back is One World. Now we know One World isn't very popular, but a lot of people don't like it. We kind of said, well, let's twist it a little bit when we bring One World back. Why don't you have these people drop on the same beach? They all live. They're kind of like one big merged tribe, but every challenge there is a rock draw, and that determines who the teams are, so that when a team wins immunity, it could still be 3 teams, but it's not necessarily only South African players or only Australian players in a team. Those teams that won the immunity, they will be safe, and one team will then go to potentially be in danger and go to tribal council. Is that something that you think would be able to kind of muddy up the water a little bit sooner as well, or would that just be a little bit too much overkill with having that many players so close to each other on the same beach, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the rock draw is a lot. Like, to me, like, that's then its own theme. Like, talk about One World as a theme. The rock draw thing is like 10 times that, as really being like the feature of something So the rock draw thing, I think is too much. I think that if you're going to drop them on the beach, drop them in tribes of their countries, but maybe in a one world theme. And it's not confusing, like the same way they did one world, but separated by gender, so you know who's on each tribe. Like, you know who's on each tribe because they're returnees in countries. They're on their tribe for like 2 to 3 votes, but they're getting to know each other. Then we send them to separate beaches and we swap them. Because you can't start them in tribes of non-national tribes. Like, it's, what are you calling it? Worlds collide? I would call it maybe something like War of the Worlds. Maybe that's a bit much when literally countries can war. But I think that they have to be in their tribes. Like, it has to have this basis to start. There has to be some sense of national pride that Americans or Australians or South Africans could be like, that's my team. But then it also needs to be muddied enough for that not to like dictate the entire trajectory of the game. So maybe it's an early swap. Maybe they're starting on one world in their tribes, but they're all getting to know each other. Maybe it's both. And then by the time they swap, they go to their different beaches. And now we have like these international relationships. I think these things are necessary, but I don't think that you can start them all in random tribes, you know, and not have it by nationality. And I also don't think that you can do a rock draw, anything like that, because I think there needs to be we need at least a few challenges of like, it's South Africa versus Australia versus America. And we're going like head to head with like tribe flags that are legitimately flags. Like, that needs to be a sense of like the worlds colliding.
This is why you're the consultant to a Survivor production team and I'm not, because you've got the better ideas here immediately.
No, you're actually right, though, because that is what I bring as a production consultant, is I shut things down. Like, Mike's the ideas man, and I'm just like, nope, less of that, more, you know, like I don't like things, so that's what I bring. So yeah, so that actually is my superpower as a production consultant.
I feel like we would balance each other out. I would be like the Mike in this role. I would just throw everything at the wall, and I love craziness. That's what I really appreciate. It's why Tony Vlachos is my favorite player. I like craziness in the game, but then again, I do think sometimes that's what's happening at a lot of these bigger franchises like the US, where and even Australia is guilty of it, I feel like, in recent seasons, where they're just throwing so much at the wall, and sometimes until it actually plays out on our screens and people are actually going through the twist, you don't actually realize, listen, this does not make that much sense. And it's something that probably shouldn't have made it past the, I guess the vision board when they were thinking about it prior to the season. So we spoke about a twist, or I guess something that you'd like to see on this season. Is there anything that you would think, like, I mean, you've mentioned a few things there already that you wouldn't like to see, but is there anything else that you would say this is probably something we should stay away from in a season such as this?
I mean, so many things, so many. Even this is my whole podcasting career.
Number one.
You're like things that you like and don't like. And this is the issue, is like when you are consulting or creating the show, like there are lots of fun ideas that are exciting. But for me, like the thing that satisfies me the most is like looking at the whole chart and being like, ooh, that's a clean kind of bare few episodes, you know, like let's let the players play, especially with hopefully a great cast as we would get for this season. So what do I not want? I'm like, how long do you have? I mean, I don't want, again, like, anything. I don't want the external islands. I definitely don't want anyone to ever be able to come back. I don't want the nullifier. I don't want knowledge is power.
End of my podcast.
The nullified take is fine, but that's the only thing we're nullifying. I want what I believe South Africa wants to be. And that to me is like the sweet spot of US, which was like late 20s, no, like without the Tyler Perry idol, but like late 20s to early 30s. I thought there were ideas in that worked, like even Blood versus Water worked, I thought was good. And it was like idols, a fair amount of idols without needing to like, around like Millennials versus Gen X, they started hiding more and more and hiding them later. So like kind of before that, definitely before Fire. We're definitely not doing Fire at the Final Four, because that would just, no, we're not doing that. 39 Days and twists like idols, and maybe like some other cool little gadgets thrown in without it being extremely overdone. That's kind of where my like ideal Survivor sits. So that's where I would want this season to be.
Okay, I just scratched off Ben Driebergen from my cast list here, because we're
not doing Fire.
We're taking away a superpower for this season. Okay, well, I guess let's get into a little bit of the cast and who you've got. This is the exciting part of the podcast, and I didn't really give you any like in a direction, like let's try and choose this type of cast or based on a specific thing. So I did it on purpose because I didn't want to influence your thinking. And I think that we both would have set different rules for ourselves and how we put together our cast. So to give you a bit of an idea, when I first started looking at it, I was like, I don't want any winners in my cast of returnees
Oh,
because
I have so
I
many
don't like.
winners.
I know, and it's fine. And I knew you
Yeah.
probably would because I was like, I don't want winners because winners have already played this game once. And I feel like unless
Yeah.
they come back in a full on winners season, they're cannon fodder in most games. But then I did have a winner kind of sneak into my cast when I was doing it. I was just kind of like struggling not to put this person into the cast.
Yeah.
But
It's
outside
usually
of
the
that,
same person as mine. Well, I have like a million winners, but I know who you're talking. Can I guess?
guess.
Adam Klein.
Well, Adam Klein I did have on my cast, but I removed him because I
Okay.
didn't want to have winners. So he was like at one
Now I'm
point. I had a
interested.
few different drafts on my on. It's an
Oh,
international
I
winner.
have not narrowed this down. Like I'm in a very annoying guess where like we were meant to do 6 per tribe. I'm like, no, let's take it to 8 per tribe, do an Australian Survivor format. Another thing we can take from Australian Survivor. I guess then we definitely need more than 16 episodes, maybe like 20 episodes,
Yeah.
24 people. And even with that, I'm like, I've got maybes. I'm happy for you to convince me of my own like scrambled thoughts based on the options that I have.
Yeah, listen, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think we could talk about, if there's people that you sort of like were thinking between two people and then you bounce them, you can sort of talk through that. I know that it's difficult, especially for both me and you, and probably more so for you because you actually get to know a lot of these people. Like I've interviewed a few Survivor players now,
Yeah.
and most of them, like I think all of them, I don't think I've met any Survivor player yet that hasn't been the nicest person when you actually interview them. And they're sometimes so different from their edit, which is quite surreal as well, because I think fans, we get very stuck on, oh, this is, I'm boxing this person into the edit. This is who they are. And then you get to know them and they're a little bit different. But it makes it harder when you're talking about this. So for me, it's exactly the same. So I guess we can go either way on this. I kind of want to do different, I guess, franchises. Let's do like our first South African, then maybe first Australian, then maybe first US one, so we can like cycle through who we would want in there. And if you can give us like a little bit of, I guess, what thought went into it. I'm very interested because I don't know how much you were involved in the casting, but you mentioned on your podcast recently, which is one of the podcasts I did listen to, because obviously some of the preseason content is always really good before we get into the recaps. You mentioned that you saw this cast come together. So did any of what you saw and how the cast came together, did you take any learnings from that and did you apply this to doing this cast here, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, my major learning was like a lot of people say no.
Wow.
Like not everyone can do it. It's like a big thing to ask of people. Or like even like if you're not even necessarily like offering them a spot, but you might reach out to someone that's just like not available. There's also usually, network constrictions. There's things that practicalities that could be really tough for casting a season, but that is not true of this season because we're in the anything can happen Tony won twice world. So this is just a dream where every person I want to play Survivor tomorrow can fly out. So yeah, that's a big thing for me. I mean, this cast for me, like I think would be a spectacular cast for my own personal want of who I want to see, and maybe it's not like enough like play diversity in terms of like play style, because it's definitely like a lot of nerds. That's who I cast on my podcast as well. That's who I get as guests. But I think for me, like a big thing is I wanted people who were not just like legendary in their own franchises, but who maybe had some connection to other franchises. So knew about them. Like for US players, there's a lot of people you can choose. And sometimes I might just go with a legend, but I wanted people who have an interest in International Survivor, who know what it is, who might know who the players are. For Australia, that's probably true as well. And that ends up being like kind of the nerdy super fans because they care enough about the global franchises, but like South Africa as well, like who will kind of geek out about this, who has connections across the aisle. So that was a big thing for me. It definitely made like my dream cast of people I love. Networks might want more kind of out there picks or more maybe casual favorites. And I did try as well to kind of put parts of that in. I tried to balance it out, but it definitely is like, here are my 3 nerdy superfan love International Survivor options and like one person that maybe it gives a little bit of difference there. So I think maybe that's like my cast for me in my dream world. Would it be completely changed by any network? I think highly yes. Like this cast would never happen. It's just like it's like a super fan dream. It's my dream.
Tony won twice. Tony won twice. That's
exactly.
the world we're in. It's all unicorns and sunshine right now.
We had all winners and Tony won it. Like the dream is real. Who knows what could happen in life,
Yeah. like, listen, the I know this is half of the Survivor community is not going to know what I'm talking about. Imagine this: Tony won in that year that he won. South Africa won the Rugby World Cup, and I'm the biggest rugby fan. And we were such underdogs that World Cup going into it. So I was just like, nothing can get better than that year for me because two of the things that I didn't think was going to happen that year happened. So it was the
Yeah,
best.
no, I get
Best
it.
time. So I'm going back to that happy
Yeah.
place. I'm back in my
Yeah.
happy place, and that's what I wanted to do with this cast. So to give you a bit of an idea with me, like I love characters. I love the big characters. I love
Okay,
the
good. We'll
sloppy
balance each
players.
other. Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna balance each other
Go
because
slop.
I'm gonna be
Yeah.
doing some sloppy characters. I'm gonna be doing people that I just want to be entertained by. But also, I do appreciate that a cast needs balance. So I do also have some of those players that probably will be more strategic, and also try to think a little bit about, do some of these players have like past relationships? Harder to do with the US. I don't think I did as well with the US because it's so many seasons. But I did try and kind of think like, how would these people sort of interact within the same tribe, and would there be like an interesting storyline there to have them in the same tribe? It's kind of how I thought about it. But that's kind of the limitations, and then obviously the winner limitation. When I swapped Adam out, I did replace him with someone that I think will fit extremely well in that slot. And I might still remove the winner that I have just to make it fair, because I kind of feel like I now have to not choose a winner.
Well,
I
who
kind
is
of feel
it?
like
I'm now so curious to know who the winner is.
Okay, so I guess I'll start then. So the winner that I have, and I feel like there's a bit of personal bias coming in here. And maybe if I should drop this winner, I should at least drop an equivalent level winner in the Australian franchise. But I've got Rob Bentele from Island of Secrets in here. And the reason for that is because he was such a dominant player. I speak to Rob quite a bit, and I know that he's interested in an international crossover season. Like, he would do it. Like, if they asked him, from the conversations that I've had. And for me, because Rob won in the way that he did against people who weren't the biggest fans of the show at the time, obviously there were some big fans as well, but I feel like he manipulated the people close to him in that circle that weren't as big fans, and he kind of rided that out till the end, and no one saw him coming. I would love to see how he would do against very capable players. And for my own, because Rob is one of those people where a lot of people see him as a top 3 winner of all the franchises because of how dominantly he won. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that's my opinion. He's definitely one of the better winners, but I would like to see if he's really that good. And I think he would be up for the challenge in such a season. And I also think that with South Africa, Rob would be a great representative in a franchise such as that. So it's kind of the things I was thinking about when I casted him. But he's the only winner that I casted at this point. I may still replace him, or I probably don't even need to, because you're going to bring up some people that I don't have in my cast. But I'm going to be like, yeah, I'd love for that person even to be in the cast as well. What do you think about that first pick?
No, I do think it's a good pick. I hadn't had Rob because, again, I was thinking more people who seem to like really love US and Australian Survivor. But I also think that with Rob, and it's a really good point that you're making, is like, who is representing these franchises? So it's like, oh, we have what is considered easily the most dominant winner of Survivor South Africa. So that definitely represents the franchise well. I do think you probably need to match it or try to across the franchises.
Yes.
And there's some people that probably can do that I can talk about from my list. But I definitely do think, yeah, let's represent how great some of these franchises be, how great the players can be. And if it's going to be really be Worlds Colliding or War of the Worlds, let's kind of send our best soldiers into battle and see who comes out on top.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and that, with that in mind, I'm going to make sure that I've got a great representative across all seasons, because I do have a great one for the US. They're not a winner, but I feel like people will look at them as a winner in any case. So, so who's your first pick for South Africa? I'm really curious.
I don't have it in like an order of picks. I did like guys and girls.
Yeah.
Can I just I'll give you, can I give you
Anyone.
some options? Can I give you some options? Because I could not narrow things down. Well, I want to do, I think Werner for me would probably be a first pick
Okay,
from the
so let's
men.
stop at Werner, because I've got him as well. So let's say he's
Yeah.
definitely on the cast because we both
Yeah.
have him.
Because I
Right.
think that he hits a lot of good points, which is like, so he's a nerdy super fan, but he's not so much in that archetype because he's a little bit older. He's a dad. He was much more a leader rather than just like a kind of often flame out younger nerdy super fan who would just be just fangirling. I mean, Werner would be too, but I think in a different way. He's also one of the best players in franchise history from South Africa. So in terms of like representing the franchise, I think that, yeah, for me, he would be an essential pick. And he's such a huge fan of the international versions and just ticks a lot of the boxes.
Yeah, so I'm going to put Werner as a definite because we both have them. I think if we both have them, they're just a
Yeah,
lock, to be honest. And
yeah.
I'm going to pronounce his name the way it's actually pronounced, and that's not taking a dig at you, but it's Werner. You bad.
I
That's how you
can't
pronounce
even
it,
try.
and that's
No,
that's
yeah.
okay. It's okay. I'm not doing it to
I'll
like
butcher
one up
it.
you,
Yeah. No.
but Werner, obviously. I think that he's got that perfect mix between being a great strategist, but also being entertaining to watch. Like I'll never forget him
Yeah.
trying to eat the clue in the episode that he did that. And also, he's like you mentioned, a big fan. I think at the end of the day, that season was his season, and everybody thought he was going to win it. So for him never to come back would be such a shame. And like you said, he is a fan of all of the international versions. He quite openly said he listened to Rob before he went out to go and play, and that he's been following them for a long time. Very sad not to see him on this season, but I know he's got some things going on in his personal life. But I'm thinking Van is a definite lock for both of us. So do you want to lead us into, I guess, the Australian franchise? Like, let's see if we can go 2 for 2 on people
Oh,
that you've
okay.
chosen.
We'll go. Oh, well, we're really like flipping around here.
Yeah,
I'm struggling with Australia. Can I do a woman from Australia?
do a woman. Yeah,
I would say Haley. And I know that you don't have winners, but if you're going to have Rob, Haley is such a dominant winner. She's a big, big fan again of the international stuff. She needs to come back as well. Again, it would be like, let's put some of the most dominant winners against each other. And that would definitely be true for her. So it would kind of start turning into a bit of an international legend season, not just an international season. And she has the fandom and she's so fun to watch. So she, for me, would be a lock.
yeah. So Haley is an interesting one. So, number one, George fan on this side here. And I understand why he didn't win the end of the game, but I felt so bad for George because I felt like he played a better game not getting voted out, and getting voted out, having to fight your way back. That was always one of the things where I looked at. But if I had to look at like Haley as a player, because I always like to look at players and how they won as separate, I think she's one of the best players to ever play. I don't rate her win as high as some fans because of the fact that she was voted out and she had to come back and win. But in saying that, Haley was on my list and then I removed her, and I do respect her a lot as a player. So it's by no means a bad pick. And I know that she's a massive fan of the show. I was so happy for her as this big fan that actually, I was her when I was 12. I was like, I want to go play Survivor one day. I want to win it. So me, the 12-year-old fan in me, was so happy for her when she managed to win it. And it doesn't matter how you win at the end of the day, she's got the $500,000. I don't. And I don't want it to come across as me saying, Haley's horrible, because I actually do love Haley. But when you say most dominant winner, she's not in my top 2 winners for Australia. But it's just being honest about my opinion and how I rank winners, because I think everybody ranks winners differently. But would she be a great representative of the season, and would she do extremely well? I mean, she's got the smarts, she's got the physicality. I mean, she beat MMA fighter in a challenge, which was crazy to see. And there is no bigger fan. She would actually know who the US players are, and I'm sure
Yeah.
she's keeping an eye on the South African players as well. So she'll probably have a really good idea and would appreciate such a season.
Yeah, I mean, getting fans from Australia is hard. Like, you're gonna have players who probably don't even know the other Australian players, let alone
Yeah.
let alone the US and South Africa players. But I think with Haley, like, her win for me is the second best Australian win. And I still think she's a much better player than her win. Like, that's how
Yes.
highly I rank her as a player. I've told her before that if I could pick one player from any of the international franchises to play any version of the show against any cast, I would pick her. She is built for the game. Like, she is literally a robot sent to play Survivor. So I think that she would be perfect for it, just on like a super fan and legendary level. And you say you're a George fan, like, honestly, like I would go George as well, because I think
Yeah.
in terms of like character legendary, super fandom, play style, and also I think George would be really mad if I didn't put him in this cast. So yeah, and George would definitely do it as well. Like, George would be keen. So
Yeah.
I
He's on
think a
my
lot of
list.
these
So
players might. Yeah.
we've both got a lock there. Obviously, as a big George fan, I understand why he didn't win. I fully understand. Like, and I'm hoping he also knows now why he didn't win that season, because of the social aspect and how he made people feel when they went there. And then obviously you had a bunch of people on the jury also that didn't care about somebody getting voted out and coming back in the game because they weren't fans like we are with the old school fan side of things. But then again, it's a difficult. I don't want to even say, like, if I was on the jury, you have to be. It must be so hard to choose a winner, like, and to go in there with preconceived ideas, like, I will only do this in this circumstance, I think is taking away from the experience of being out there and actually voting for the player who you believe played the best game. And also, like I always say, the best person always wins. The best player doesn't necessarily always win the game, and there is definitely a case to be made for that. I definitely think Haley's a solid choice, so we'll keep her on the board similar to Rob Bentelli. I think if you put Rob Bentelli in, you kind of have to put Haley in, so I think we'll keep her as an option there to potentially put her in. So let's dip over to the US, and I haven't actually given a name in a while, so maybe I'll do the next one. So for me, this person, and in the US, there's a higher likelihood we're going to have like two completely different teams. So I'll start with someone that I think probably is going to come back for a second chance season or a so close season, maybe a runner-up season or something like this. We're actually going to see them play in the Challenge USA very recently, and it's going to be Dominic Abate. Like, I kind of alluded to the fact that I loved Ghost Island. I know a lot of fans weren't as high on it. I think he's one of the best players to ever play to never win the game. I mean, losing on a draw, there is no bigger storyline that he can come in to a season such as this, but as the one that he has. So for me, having Dom there as someone that's like one of the true last mafiosos that have played the game in the US, I would really like to see how he actually rubs shoulders with some of the international players. I do know he does watch International Survivor as well. So I know that via Wendell having a connection with Tom, I know that Dom is like a casual fan. He's not like massive, but he keeps an eye on it. So I think he'd be open to it.
Yeah, I mean, well, I had Wendell as like a maybe because I know that he's been involved, and once we're getting winners in, and Wendell's obviously a great character, but he has played again where Dom hasn't, and now that I know that he watches international, I can shift that maybe over to Dom. I do think it's interesting. I wonder if it's the right format for him to come back. I think he's someone who needs to come back. I'd love the US to do in a few seasons like Survivor New Era and get some of the best players since 34, where there really hasn't been an opportunity for non-winners to come back. I guess like 38, but it's been few and far between basically. So I'd love them to do that. I kind of wonder if that would be a benefit for him just because he's kind of like a modern icon, and to have it be like a modern US returnee season. But I'm always happy to see Dom back. Like, I really enjoy him. So I'm not going to veto it. It wasn't on my list, but I think it's a very interesting pick.
I think that it's an absolute shame that we're going to see him. Like, I'm a big Challenge fan as well. Like, you'll know, I talk to Chantel Francis and Drew Angel Cake all the time about that, also on my podcast. I still just think it's such a shame that he's going to go play the Challenge before he gets back to play Survivor. He's one of us. He should be playing another Survivor
and I'm not
season.
Going to watch him, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's such a shame, But okay, so we don't both have Dom. Let's try our luck at another US player. I think we may have very different US casts. So let's see.
Yeah, there's a lot of options with the US. Like, this was a tough one. Yeah. Okay, kind of in the like connected to Wendell space. I would really like Bryce Isaiah because I feel like the US aren't going to cast him because they should be doing the theme that Survivor South Africa is currently doing, where they have pre-mergers versus post-mergers. They give, like, he would be so perfect for that theme, where someone who went at their first tribal gets a new opportunity because they have like massive potential. But the US, I don't think is really going to ever focus on that. And I think that, especially being like a while out now from Cagayan, like, he is in a tricky spot with that. So I just want Bryce to be cast. He's also gone to South Africa to play in like live Survivor games there. He definitely has connections with South African players and possibly Australian players. Like, he's just like in the community, a very social person. We've done like It's a Look before. Like, I know that he has relationships across the board, and I think he'd bring like a lot of entertainment. So yeah, I would really like Bryce.
Now, you know me, I like the characters. Cagayan is my favorite season of all time. So, yeah, I think Bryce is someone that for me probably I didn't have on, but I'm not going to veto him. I think we keep him on the board and we come back to that at a later stage.
We'll have a US cast of like 20 people. It would be fine.
20 people. Like, we're just pretty much, we're just going to have like the next second chance season or something sorted out
people
by the end of this.
Yeah. Great.
I knew it was going to be difficult coming into the US cast. All right, so let's go back to the South African franchise, and I'm going to go for someone else here that I think you may have on here. But I'm not sure. It's someone that, I was a big fan of them. I'm going to stay with Island of Secrets. I know I just mentioned Rob Bentelli. I'm going to put Jacques Burger on here as someone that I think would really appreciate an international crossover season. He's been a fan for a very long time. One of the reasons I love Jacques Burger, and I always put him up as someone that I'd like to see in an international season, is the scrappiness in him as a player. Like, he went there, he's a fan, he made the cardinal mistake of overplaying too soon, playing his idol incorrectly, and then the rest of the season he had to scramble and he had to fight from the bottom for every inch that he got that season, and he proved that he could do that and that he was able to work back from a position of being an outcast, really, and get himself to the merge, and then almost sort of wiggle his way through it, and then also do the idol play. He's a good showman. So I think that international audiences would like a player such as Jacques. I know it's very similar to like an Adam Klein in some ways, but an Adam Klein that hasn't really won the show. But, I think Jacques would be a great addition to a cast such as this.
Yeah, so my issue is that I have, again, like all these like young nerdy super fans, and they're all my friends, and I don't want to choose between them. So I had Jacques, I had Dino. I mean, we're going to see how Dino's going to play, so maybe we should kind of take that off the board until we know like where he's at in Survivor. Although I will say I had a lot of SA9ers on this cast because a lot of the fans are on SA9. Kieran is someone I really want to see play again, and he's not on SA9. And then like Rainier, I also put in there, and he's not on SA9. So like, I don't really want to choose between them. If you didn't have anyone else on your list, I'm happy to then like default to Jacques. I think they'd all be good picks because they're all kind of built from what makes Survivor South Africa so great. By the fans, for the fans, with the fans, all of that. And they get these super fan players on. Not that the US don't do that, but I feel like, especially the modern era really does have a lot of super fans. But I feel like there are so many people who get cast on Survivor South Africa who are just like into the niche community. And all of these players are examples of that, where they just love the show so much. They've been watching the US since the beginning. They're watching Australia too. Like, there's just a lot of passion for the show, and they're great strategists and good characters, I think, as well. But I don't think we can have all of them because it won't fit. And I think actually we can probably only fit one of them. So I'm like happy to put it on Jacques if that's all you had. But I think they're all good options. I think that they're all on my list.
So you kind of mentioned with Dino, the reason I didn't put Dino on, and I would love to put Dino on here. I can't put him on here based on past performance. I'm so happy that he gets an opportunity to play this season, and that he might be able to right the wrongs of that season. And I think he's going to do a lot better. Not to get into Return of the Outcasts too much, but I just have a feeling he's coming in a lot more relaxed this season than what he did in his first season. But based on past performance, I felt like Jacques was the option for me. Ranir kind of played a very similar game to Jacques. The only thing is I like the scrappy players, so that's why I kind of went
Rainier
to
did
Jacques
it from dominance until he
exactly.
didn't. And Jacques scrapped the whole time from the beginning.
But Rainier, another great name. It's just, do you need both Rainier and Jacques on the same season? I feel like the reason I went to Jacques was because I like the scrappiness a little bit more. So I'm happy to make the call on that. If Rainier or anybody listens to this, Dino, it's my fault. I made the call on this one.
And Kieran, that's all on you. Because I feel like all of these players fit into, again, like the Shannon Guss dream cast of any theme. Because those are the players I love to see. I understand that we need a little bit more scope. I do understand that from a TV perspective, but like in my dream, it's just, I love Millennials versus Gen X. I love Cambodia. All of the criticisms people, I love SA8. Every single season that people criticize as too game body, I'm like, you have all the game bodiness in the world. I'm just like eating more donuts. That's how I feel about
I like all those seasons as well. Like, I mean, Immunity Island was my favorite South African season. Absolutely loved it. It was very difficult to choose a cast with not too many of them in it. And I think maybe like 3 out of my 8 is from that cast. So, I heavily lean towards that cast in any case, because I just love them so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, we're 2 people sitting here podcasting about Survivor, international Survivor. Like, of course, we love the game body stuff. It makes a lot of sense. But yeah, we need to maybe branch out a little bit so Jacques can represent. And he's not on SA9, and I know a lot of people wanted to see him there, so he can represent on this season.
All right. Do you want to do another South African or Australian one for this next one? We've actually got 2 locks for South Africa so far, just to keep a tally. Jacques, Burger, and Van der Gebed. Do you want to maybe do like a female?
I'll do Rob Bentley, because you just cut out most of my male picks. So we can put Rob Bentley in. It's fine. That's good. Let's look at it.
Okay. So we've got 3. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Okay, well, yeah, I mean, I've got 3 women I would kind of want to lock. And I'll say this one first, because if we're not doing anyone else from SA, there's a couple of people I want from SA9, and I feel like they're necessary. And this person is true of that. And it's Palessa. Because my cast, and we're going to go to the US, my cast is kind of really like predicated on like this Palessa Adam thing. Because how cool will that be in the first episode, where it's like you see the moments and you see Palessa do it, and then you see Adam try to do it, and we flash back to that, and getting them to interact. Like that was such a massive moment for international Survivor fans that Adam did that, and he called her the Palessa Idol, not on the show because they wouldn't let him, but we know that he did. Palessa as well is such a good pick because she's an amazing character. She's a great player. She's indicative of Survivor South Africa as a franchise. She's a great representative of it as, you know, an icon of the franchise, let alone of International Survivor because of the Adam thing. So I kind of feel like we don't know how it's going to go for SA9, but no matter how it goes, even if she's first boot, I feel like put her on this season.
Yeah, I mean, Palessa's on my list as well. Love her. I'm not going to argue with that. I'm going to move on to another, while we're just here with South Africa and we're getting a few of the ladies out of the way, I want to do another lady, and specifically also who's going to be coming back for this season. And I know people are going to be like, why are you putting her on? I loved both Jack and Steffi from that season, and I've got Steffi on my list to come back again for another season. I would love to see them back in the same tribe and to see how that would play out. There is obviously a little bit of a rivalry from back in the day. I know that they have spoken since the game, but it would be interesting to play out. To give you an idea, again, I like the characters. I love people that are stubborn. She reminds me of like the typical South African mentality, which is to tell it to you as it is, like to be straightforward. Sometimes people that are international can look at that as being a bit abrasive, but I like her. I like the fact that she's a warrior. If I had to get someone in there that physically could stand up to like a Haley, if you're putting it in, like I would want Steffi on there to compete against her.
She's gonna get beat up. It'd be cool to see her in the Australian challenges. I think that would be a big thing. Again, like some people might straight up die. Like we're gonna put you in Australia with the Australian challenges against Steffi. Like welcome to the season. I feel like for Steffi, I mean, I don't think that there'd be a sense of fandom where she'd kind of understand the grandeur of what she's doing and know who she's playing against. And that for me is kind of a big deal, especially when you're looking at Survivor South Africa cast, where they're like the franchise that is most likely to have that global knowledge and to really like understand what we're doing here. Like the US, it was hard to pick people who maybe have like, again, watched down to international because US is the biggest. Australia does not have a lot of super fans, so that was tough too. But South Africa, there's a lot of people who are like very into it and even maybe have had relationships across the board that I don't feel Steffi has had. So it's something I kind of lean away from.
Put in a maybe for now?
Put in a maybe. I kind of feel like for the SA9ers, I'm like, I really feel like I don't even know what, like who you are as a Survivor player yet. Like it hasn't played out, but I really have to feel like you are worth it now to look past the fact that I shouldn't really be casting you on something before I've seen your second season. And I feel like Palessa is that for me. And the other player I have is that for me that I want to do that for, but I didn't have Steffi on that list.
Okay, well, let's move for a second. Let's move away from South Africa because we've spoken quite a bit about this. I want to keep it moving towards some of the other franchises as well. So far, we've got George, and I am willing to put Haley on it as well. You've convinced me because we've got, I think if you've got a winner from South Africa, you need a winner from Australia, and Haley will represent well in a season such as that. But I want to go and add someone else into here. And I don't know if you're going to have this person, but I'm going to put it up in any case. My favorite tribe from Australia of all time is Saga. And I have got a very soft spot for that tribe. And I've got a feeling we may have a few people from that tribe this season. But I'm going to put in Sarah Taliki as someone that is forgotten. She hasn't played the game in a long time, but had so much promise when she played the first time. I felt like strategically she was great, and the way that she maneuvered in that game, and she was great at confessionals. I feel like now she was about, I think, 21 when she played the first time. She's a bit older now as well, a little bit wiser. Not that she wasn't wise back then, but I'd like to see her come back. There's kind of like, you know, when Mike Fenter played the first time in South Africa, I thought he was a bit young, but if he was to play back like when he's like close to his 30s, I would be interested to see what a Mike Fenter, a bit of more mature Mike Fenter could do in the game. So Sarah is definitely someone that I thought deserved some love on the podcast, as someone that I'd love to see come back. And if not for this season, a second chance season at least.
Yeah, so Sarah I have on my list. If you could tell me any returnee is coming back on Australian Survivor, you can have pretty much like one person come back or one woman come back. I think Sarah will be number one for me. Like I've spoken a lot about how it was a travesty that she wasn't on All Stars, although I understand now that there are limitations to casting an All Star season, but it was painful. My issue is that I have 5 women here for Australia, and she's the one who has the least international connection. So I don't know if maybe she's better off on like an Australian returnee season particularly, but like I'd never say no to Sarah. But now I'm like, I'm not fitting in because I didn't make hard decisions before the podcast. So now I'm like finding that I'm struggling a little bit. But I mean, I'm never going to veto Sarah. And I did have her on my list. And I think that she is someone who needs to return to Survivor in any capacity. So for sure.
I feel like that's a lock. I mean, just the fact that you said you would put her back in any season, I'm going to take
The
that as a
first
lock.
person I'd pretty much put back in any season. Yeah.
I feel like I need to be like decisive here and say that's a lock. We're going to put Sarah on the season. And yeah, I'd love to see it. Even if she's not connected, I feel like Sarah is one of those players that adapts really well to the situation that she's in. And I think she would find a way. Maybe if there was like pre-game alliances, it would be something that she could struggle to adapt with if people have already, cross-pollinated a little bit and there's alliances that's going on. But I also think that I've got two other players, and I'm going to put both of them in here because I mentioned the saga, and you can tell me what you think of both of these because they're from her original tribe. I want to see Sam Gash back, and I want to see Luke Toki back. Like, I mean, you cannot do an international crossover season without Luke Toki. He is my favorite Survivor player from Australia of all time, and that will probably never change, I don't think. And he's the king of the jungle, and I feel like people would miss out not seeing that. And then another bigger than life character now, I feel like almost the same level as Luke, but not maybe for different reasons. And the Australian public didn't take well to it last season. I wasn't a big fan of how she was being perceived as Sam Gash because of the move that she made, becoming, the thief or whatever, the Ice Queen. They had different nicknames for her at different times on the show. But, that move alone, I feel like gave her enough of a reputation to be someone like a villain, a lovable villain that you would love to see in a season such as this. And I think that, like I said, a saga, such a strong tribe. So I've got 3 of them in my cast that I would like to see. What do you think about both of those players, and were they on your list?
Yeah, Luke, I had on my list. I mean, I think that you need to have Luke. I know that he's had a lot of connection with the Survivor South Africa players. I know he's a US casual. Like, he's definitely caught up in the last few years, but he'd know what's going on, and he's known. That's the thing. If we're talking about representing a franchise, you have George. And also, it's probably a bit unfair for me to say Sarah back first because that's probably how I felt around All Stars, and it continues to be true. But now there are people who can kind of tie that. Sam has definitely come up since then. George, Haley. But like really of all those players, like I feel like there's a lot more to see of Sarah. So Sarah's in. Luke is, he represents the franchise. He is with David probably, and now George, like the biggest characters that we have. That all the South Africans I think would be really excited to have him, and even a lot of Americans, like people know what Luke's about, and he is an incredible character and he's a fun strategist. So I definitely had Luke. I hadn't thought of Sam, but now I'm intrigued. So now I'm just adding to a list where I have too many people, so I'm a little bit concerned about it. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say no to seeing Sam again. I wonder if we need a little bit of time, but who knows when this fantasy season is happening. Definitely for her benefit of how she was perceived. I think Sam's an amazing player, an amazing character. I love what she brought to the latest season. I'd love to see her kind of play without Mark and have her own game. For that reason, I kind of wonder if maybe I wouldn't even want to constrict it to this theme. Maybe just like a more general returnee season, Australian Survivor returnee season. But even in saying that, I can't veto it. But what about all my picks? Like, I love all your picks and I'm very into it.
Well, I'm just going to make it a maybe for now, and then we can talk about a lot of your picks still, because I'm going to leave that as a maybe. But I just want to add that, I heard all of that noise that was happening when Sam played the game. And I feel like if she played an international version, the fandom would be very different and would be a lot more receptive. Yeah, it'll be a lot more receptive to the way that she played the game. But Sam would definitely be somewhere in my top 5. So I'm willing to let go of that. But I feel like her reputation is big enough now to be like, the Johnny Fairplay, Grandma Lie type of thing of the US Survivor. She could carry this, and I don't think, sadly enough, I know she would want to forget about that. People are going to remember this for many years to come. She's going to be and again, I hope she embraces it down the line, and people embrace the fact as the game evolves that it was purely a game move at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, Haley gets it the other way. I've seen comments where it's like Haley didn't do anything until the end. I'm like, a lot of her great moves were pre-merge. Both of these women might benefit from a more universal audience that can catch up a little bit to the moves that they're making on television. So that'll be a good thing for both of them. It's really hard to cast this. I don't know that Sam has a lot of international crossover. I think the thing I'm most intrigued about is seeing her play by herself and to come back from her biggest performance. Like, again, I wouldn't have necessarily cast her onto All Stars. Unlike Sarah, I wasn't like, well, where's Sam? Then she was perfect casting for Blood versus Water, and now she's like cemented herself as like a legend of the franchise. So it's hard to say no to that as well. There's a lot of people just from even like the last couple of seasons, which is what makes it really hard as well.
Let's do another Australian one before we go over to the US again.
I don't know that you're not going to have this person on your list because they're a winner. I had Pia because Pia was such a big fan.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of her story. She's a winner. She's a great character and player. I know that she's gotten into South Africa since. So I think that that's a really fun part of it. She's a huge fan of the US. I've had her recapping the US on the podcast. And again, it's like that super fan international connection without needing to like fit into necessarily like the Haley or even the George like super fan mold. So she brings a little bit of a difference as a character while also having that connection and that super fandom and being a winner.
So here's the person I chose instead of Pia because Pia was on my initial list, and then I was like, I don't want too many winners.
Why did you say
just,
no winners? Like, why did you give yourself?
I don't know why I put that on my.
Possible. Yeah.
I don't know. I think the whole thing with me is I've just been burned seeing winners come back before and then get voted out because they're winners, and like it's like nothing they
not
can
in
do
this
to
beautiful world that we've created where everything's perfect.
They've had the Men in Black little flashlight and they've had their memories wiped and nobody knows that they've won their respective seasons before. But the person that I had, and I think that I'm willing, since we're loosening up the rules around winners a little bit, I'm willing to compromise because Pia's my number one winner of all time for Australia. I think she's the best winner. Yeah, I love her. I absolutely adore Pia.
I love Pia too, but wow.
Yeah. No, I love, and it's so strange because she doesn't play the game the way that I normally love seeing people play the game, but I absolutely love it. Maybe this is a podcast separately one day for me to tell you why I rank players in a certain way. But I think Pia, for me, number one, she beat David Gannat, who is number two for me, and a lot of people see him as number one, but she outplayed him in that season. So I give her all the respect for doing so. And I know that she
much better in his second season, though.
Yeah, he played so much better, but also she gave him a lot of advice in between, and he did talk to her and Janine before he went out there. I know that from conversations I've had with different people, but I'm not taking anything away. You can get coached, go out there. It doesn't mean you still got to implement it, and you've got to play to the situation. You can have the best plan. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? How the saying goes. So, I mean, I don't take any credit away from him, and I understand that it could be either or of them for me as my number one and two players in Australia as winners. But I love Pia. I had Janine Ellis in place of Pia because I would love to see Janine Ellis come back. I know she probably will never come back. I feel like she's kind of moved on from this part of her life. So due to that, I'm willing to make the swap because I feel like they're kind of interchangeable. They played a very similar game. I think Janine was a little bit more aggressive, more in the forefront, and Pia used her as a shield, obviously. But still, it hurts me to remove Janine. I don't know if you had her, but if you didn't have her, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to replace her on the team.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have Janine. I will say this will be a real fantasy season. Like, we're getting Janine back on Survivor. I was talking about this with my husband the other day because we're watching Celebrity Apprentice where she's an advisor. And I'm like, it's kind of insane that Janine gave 50 days of her life to this show. But you understand what an hour with Janine will cost someone? Like, we were looking up just like success of international Survivor contestants, like not just Australia. Like, it's actually crazy that she wasn't just like, oh, now that I'm on the jury, I'm going to bounce. Like, you can zoom me in. You can zoom me into the jury. Like, she sat there at Ponderosa. That's insane. It's insane that we got that. So yeah, I think we would need to cast her because I feel that that's the only way we'll ever get her back on Survivor. But I do think for this season, while I love them both, Pia fits the bill better because she is a winner. So if we're like representing things, although to have the godmother back, she would represent a lot well too. But she's also more of a super fan. It's a bigger part of her story. She'd also know people more. So I just think she fits into this theme better. But I feel wrong ever rejecting Janine because anytime we have with her, it's a gift.
I'm biased because I've had a few chats with Pia in the past, and I just love her as a person. So so I think this is where my bias comes in. I've never spoken to Janine, but I'd love to have a chat with her sometime in the future. And I mean, let's not forget, she did some great training before she went out there to play the game. She looked like 15 years younger than what she was playing that game, and she kept up in the challenges. So I was so impressed by her that season. The godmother. I kind of feel like you need the godmother, but I understand. I agree with you. Let's go with Pia.
Also, if we're trying to have the winners not be voted out, the more we can give of them so they can like either be a bigger threat or form something of their own coalition or be a little bit more shielded will be maybe better for them. I kind of lean towards the latter so we can start protecting some of these like icons.
Yeah. I wonder between Pia and like Haley, I feel like Haley would come in with a bigger threat and Pia would find a way to Pia's the kind of player that could, in my opinion, I don't want to put targets on her, but I feel like she could win again. She reminds me of Sarah Sandra in so many ways. And I've actually told her this as well. But anyways, different podcast. Let's go back into the US because this is the one where we're really struggling, and we might just have to have like two different teams, and that's okay with me as
You're
well.
not agreeing. Yeah.
No, because it's just,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think we came into this thinking that there would be any chance. But one of the people that I do want to throw out there, and you would have seen, I posted on Twitter earlier today, hey, who would you like to see based on a couple of players? Have a vote out there. The person who won and weren't originally in my list, but because the TNT audience wanted it, I'm going to definitely put this person on the list now as Omar from this last season. So a lot of people wanted to see him and come and play this season. Is that someone that you're opposed to? Because he's the only one from my cast from the last two seasons that would actually represent in this.
Omar's on my list.
There we go.
Yeah, so lock it in. Omar's perfect. I feel like he is a huge super fan. I know he's watched all of International.
Oh, that's cool.
So he's really excited about the show. He's such a great character. He's such a great strategist. He represents the modern era so well. As such a good kind of, representative for just kind of what the US is currently doing. As such a huge fan. Like, again, he is in the mold of all the nerdy super fans that I had to veto earlier, but for the US, so like, I'm definitely going to sneak another one in. And I'd love to see him go head to head with, I know, icons that he's watched and respected. Yeah, knock it in. I think that's a great pick.
That's so cool. So awesome. Good to know that Omar, I didn't know he was that big of a fan, but I've had like one or two DMs
he's
of Omar.
watched all of it. Yeah.
Nicest guy. Well, now I can talk to him about Survivor South Africa. So that'd be cool.
I said as well, I'm like, oh, what have you watched of it? Expecting like, because I know that he was like listening to the podcast, but I didn't know that he had how much he'd watched. And he's like, oh, all of Modern International. I was like, oh, okay. you qualify then for my, I like you.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, okay. The next person, I don't know if you've got this person, but because originally I wasn't going to put a winner on here. And like I said, I mean, we can workshop this thing. I don't want to be too difficult. There's a lot of great options, but this person, I feel like if you want to bring back a legend, this person would fit in really well. I don't know if she watches International Survivor at all, but I know that the fans would love it. They'd love to see her on a show such as this, and more so for the South African fans of the show, and maybe even some of the Australian people that have watched the show from the start. I would love to see Saree Fields come back, and she's the only person from that top bracket that I sort of like dare to dream we can get one of the greats to come and play the game again.
Yeah, no, same. Like, agreed on all of that. She's my first pick. She's like the only, well, I've got winners, like I have again, like Adam and stuff, but like Mount Rushmore level US, I only put Saree. I have a maybe, we'll talk about it, but Saree for me is a definite for a few reasons. I've been saying, I want someone who watches International, I want someone who's connected to International. I don't care if Saree's ever seen an I don't even care if she knows where Australia is on a map. I want Saree back on Survivor, and if I'm doing a Dreamcast, she'll always be in it. I have to hope that some of my brethren from South Africa and Australia won't do her as dirty as like the US show. Maybe just like we'll get some new juju into the mix where she's not cursed on the US franchise. Maybe she'll not be cursed on this one. And like, how could anyone ever say no to Saree? She's my favorite player of all time, globally. Right. Yeah. So
I didn't know that. So that's your favorite player of all time. That's awesome.
Saree and Tony. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's Tony. It always has to be. And I had to fight the urge not to pick him for this, and I didn't pick him for this. I don't know if you dared to dream to put him on, because if you get Tony and like a Luke Toki in the same thing, and Chappies,
we do all three of them, and and the world ceases to exist. I don't know how they did it, but the world has ended. I mean, that's an attractive option. He wasn't on my list because, again, for the US, other than Saree, I went more with people who were connected to the international franchises. I've also never even considered, I'm just thinking about this now, I've never actually thought about like a post Tony won twice world. Like, will Tony ever play again? Do I want him to ever play again? Is the story perfect? I've literally never considered this because he won and I just sat with that in my happiness for 2 years. Yes. But I don't know. I've never thought about Tony, the 2-time winner returnee, because I never thought about how Tony could be a 2-time winner, and then it happened, and I've just been like a state of zen pretty much ever since, but I haven't thought about it.
I feel like if you're Tony, you've won $3 million. You are widely recognized as the best to ever play. Most people will say GOAT, is Tony. And for very good reasons. He beat such a high-level cast in Winners at War that you have to give him all the credit for being able to do it against proven people, and also for how he changed his game. I just don't think that there's like any upside for Tony to come back and play the game again, unless Jeff like emotionally blackmails him to say you have to give back to the show, and then he feels like some sort of guilt to come back and do like a Legends season or something like that. But it's just like, there's no point for him to come back. Honestly, it hurts me to say this. I kind of hope he doesn't come back, because I love the
I
perfect
miss him.
world of, yeah, I do
Yeah.
miss him as well. Like, let's get
Yeah.
him. I know you don't watch this, but let's get him on the challenge. He became a
No,
challenge
no, they
beast
don't
from
have to
last
watch
season.
the challenge, and I don't have time. No, I mean it's really interesting because like the two biggest Tony stands in the world were both kind of saying no to this. I do think there's intrigue there. I do think like a Luke
Mm,
Chappie's Tony cross thing
would be
is
fun.
insane, and he's always fun. Like you know that you're gonna have a good time with it. I just don't think this is the place for him. He's
But
not super
how,
internationally connected. He's not on the grid.
yeah,
This isn't for Tony. I don't feel.
like how fit would the cameraman would have to be that season to like run
Yeah.
around behind like Chappies and like Luke
So
and
many spy
Tony.
shacks that like yeah, they just is this my spy shack? Sorry, I got confused. My one's just one tree over. Like they're all different. Yeah, I mean,
We
it
would
would be
have like the
crazy.
first cameraman medevaced from
Yeah.
dehydration, just
Yeah.
running behind
Yeah.
these guys as they're doing their
Yeah.
thing. But okay, so Tony definitely not on.
Oh, I
I'm
don't want
gonna
to say
move.
that though. Definitely. Okay,
Oh,
well.
you do want to have Tony
No,
on?
no,
You,
no,
you still
no,
want to
no.
put him?
He's not on my list. It's not right for him. It just doesn't. We have a dream season. We're not putting Tony on. We're like, what are
Yeah.
we doing? But no, I agree that it's not right for this. But Omar's on. Sari, we've agreed on.
Yes.
Yeah. Where do you want to go?
We've
Because I
got
have a
two.
sneaky pick. I want to fudge
Dude,
something.
I
What
want
do
to
you think?
try and I want to do one more pick that I think both of us may have.
Okay.
I'm taking a stab at this because I feel like if we can get like 2 in a row or 3 in a row where we're like we're actually making progress here
You're
because
gonna get a
it's
prize. Yeah.
yeah. So the next one that I've got is also in that vein of more nerdy players, probably a big fan, someone that
I do
watches
like
the
this.
global
Sounds
seasons.
good.
They're friends with Leroux Butter. In fact, they got an Osindile buff last year. I believe it was an Osindile buff, or it might have just been one of those Immunity Island ones. But Rick Devens, like I want to see Rick Devens back on our screens. And I feel like he would be one of those people that would appreciate a season such as this. And he was actually my replacement for Adam Klein. But we can talk about Adam Klein at a later stage as well. Do you have Rick Devens on your list?
I do. What is
Yes.
happening? This is so good. Devon's is such an advocate for the international franchises. He even tweeted today that he's not going to be watching Big Brother and he'll be watching Survivor South Africa. Like that's just good marketing for the show. Like to
Yes.
have like a big voice in the US Survivor community, just really championing it, which Adam does as well. But I think for Devon's, like he is like emotionally connected to Survivor South Africa. I think Leroux would definitely want to cast him. Like there's that
Yes.
connection there. He hasn't been able to come back, and he also really represents a different kind of modern era to Omar, who's like the new era, 42, versus like the late 30s. Again, they haven't had their time because we went straight to an all-winner season, and then we went to the new era in the 40s. So he's someone that I think the US would bring back immediately if they were doing a returning season. Maybe we can just like beat them to that and put him on the season instead.
I love it. I love it. I mean, I'm all here for a Rick Devens return. So tell me, who's your sneaky pick? Let's see if we both had a sneaky pick, because I've got a couple of sneaky picks as well, but I don't know if it's going to be the same.
Well, this is a sneaky pick in that I'm trying to like manipulate the format because now we've got so many great Australian women. I'm still trying to cut people out, and we've already got Sam, so we might actually have filled that if we agree on it. So then, where does Nina go? Because we need Nina back,
So you
right?
see,
Like,
I didn't have Nina on my list, and I don't have any pre-mergers on this list, even though I know it's not Nina's fault, and she could have played a very good game. I kind of feel like like I've always said tongue in cheek, how funny would it be to have Nina represent Australia against the US, because the US franchise was the one that turned their back on her when she applied. I believe back in David vs. Goliath, she was an alternate
yeah.
back then and she didn't get on the show. So I kind of feel like I wouldn't put her on the US. I would normally put her on Australia because that's the season she's represented. So I would kind of want her to be an Australian pick if that is the case. And you mentioned Sam is the one that we picked. So I would kind of say it would be between Sam and Nina for me at this stage. I kind of feel like Sam is the bigger get out of the two of them at this stage. I would kind of lean towards Sam, and it hurts me because I'd love to see Nina on my screen again. I just don't know if she's at that level yet.
So I'd love to put Nina in for the US because I have Sandra as a question mark because obviously she's a legend and she has that connection. She played on Australian Survivor, but I don't think Sandra wants to do that, and I don't know that it's the right fit for her. I'd love to have Nina there, have what has been a cross-continental blood versus water story play out on this international season where it's like, okay, we watched Sandra for many seasons and we saw her and Nina together, and now Nina is evolving in the US where she should be. She's a US citizen, but she's doing it to evolve what is an international storyline. And I think that would work well having her there instead of Sandra, not putting her on the Australian tribe because I can't fit her. And because I think it makes sense. It's like she's back home now where she belongs and she has that extreme international connection. She's also such a great character, and I know it's pre-merge, but there's so much more to see, and I feel like she's a returnee that we really need. So she brings something really different to the cast, like such a unique facet of international Survivor that no one else has. So I really feel strongly about Nina. And then the other woman I had, like, while we're just like kind of crossing them off for Australia, I had Tessa, because Tessa is such a big fan, such a great character, great strategist, someone I really want to back for All Stars, but she had her own stuff going on. I know that she maybe sits in like a similar spot to Haley. I've actually compared Haley to her quite a few times. She's also like played with Sarah. So maybe she's a little bit too much in the crosshairs of the rest of this tribe. So I'm happy to part with Tessa. And again, like sadly let go of another like nerdy superfan who I'm friends with. I'll get Sam. Like I'll agree with Sam, but then I want to put Nina in the US women. Like that's the deal I'm willing to make.
Okay, I'm with you on that. I love how you're bargaining with me, because this next person that I'm going to go with for the US
Oh, okay.
is going to be
Angelina.
someone
Yeah.
that loves bargaining. So
Yeah.
I'm going to go for Angelina
Yeah.
Keeley.
Loving the
I
mind
want to.
reading. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely want to see her back. I had so much fun with her the first time when she played out there. Who can ever forget the whole plan to vote out Larissa for her jacket, and then ultimately her trying to get the jacket of Natalie in the end, her building a ladder or getting the ladder to go and get the idol. So many funny moments with her. I think that she would be absolutely hilarious to watch on a stage like this, and I do like the characters. So she's someone that I have as a more of a character casting and someone that's going to be fun to watch. I had Debbie at one point, and I was like, no, this is just going too far. I'm going to take Debbie out of it. I can't like completely set the US team up for failure. They need someone that's actually going to do well. And that's nothing bad to Debbie, but let's be honest, her gymnastic skills wasn't top notch. So for me, I feel like she could be a really good fit on it as well. Do you have Angelina on there? I've got a feeling like so wide. You probably don't.
I don't, but I struggled with the US women because again, I wanted people that I felt were really connected to international or sorry. That was my category. Just that was the criteria that I was looking at. But I do think that she again represents a lot of modern US. We're really choosing a lot of people who haven't had their chance to come back as being returnees,
Yes.
but should be returnees, but there just hasn't been that window for them in the US. So I think that Angelina is a good pick. I think especially as we start to represent these like modern eras, and I think as we look for more characters, I would be happy to put her in.
Great. Okay,
So I'm
so
not like super tied to my US women. Like I had like a couple of interesting options, but they might also be a little bit covered by what we've already said.
okay, so now I want to talk, while we're talking about you as woman here, let's talk about my two remaining females, and we've got one spot left. So I'll tell you my last two, and you tell
Okay. And then
me
I'll exactly.
how you feel about them,
Yeah.
and if if we have to choose between them, or if you've got someone else.
Yeah.
I had both Lauren Beck, because of how much she does even still now outside of the game, and she's very connected to the Survivor community. Obviously
Yeah.
a great player as well. Very unlucky that she was I think outplayed by someone that is a much better winner than what people realize, and how he won that season. But anyway, so Lauren Beck, and then her namesake Lauren O'Connell. And Lauren O'Connell, I kind of feel like I'm on my own island with this one sometimes in the fandom, because I really appreciated her on that season for the fact that she was such a physical specimen. I mean, she was better than most of the men in her tribe, and she was like actually carrying them through a lot of the challenges in the early stages of it. And I thought, she was 21 the first time she played. She's a bit older now. She's a big Kelly Wentworth fan who I don't have on this season, because I love Kelly Wentworth as well. But I would like for Lauren, and again, I kind of have leaned into that newer school players that haven't played again. You're 100% right. I kind of feel like she could be a great addition in a season such as this, in the sense that you will need someone physical. When I was thinking about like Haley, I was thinking about someone like a Stephanie, potentially in my own mind, who would be these physical women that could go up against each other and do really well. I thought she could do really well. So you've got the strategist, or you've got someone that's a little bit more, I guess, physical. Plus, I also want to say she was done dirty by Age of Extinction and Chris outplaying her, coming back with information that he had from the Edge that just put him in such an advantage to manipulate her and giving her idol to him. So, I kind of feel like it's justice for her because of the Edge.
Yeah, I mean, we were all done dirty with that. And like a lot of those players, like Victoria as well, like it was a tough one with Chris
Yes.
coming back from the Edge. I mean, I guess no surprise that I would lean Lauren Beck, like more of the strategic element. The players that I have here as well, like our newer school, just great characters. I think like Evie would be great. They did recap Australian Survivor with me, a newer fan to international, but definitely dipping a toe. And then the other person I have, if we're looking at like new school legends, Marianne. I mean, I want Marianne back already, and it's barely been a couple of weeks since she played and won. But I think if we're looking at like different winner types, we get her on as a winner. We see how not just like the new school era of US is going to kind of stack up in a global landscape, but how a new school winner would stack up. Also, amazing character. I feel like she'd just be a lot of fun. And I'm worried that her returning potential for the US is now a little worse because there are less opportunities for winners to come back sometimes. Like, Survivor South Africa season 9 is a perfect example. So if we're bringing back winners here, it's like, let's bring back Marianne. Now, is that like too close to Omar? Do we kind of already cover some of that new school stuff with some of the other players that we've chosen? Maybe. But I feel like Marianne would kind of be my top pick from the 4 that we have spoken about. But I mean, look, I think Lauren Beck is interesting as well. I do think that, like, I love Lauren Beck. I've podcasted with her. Like, she's super fun. She's also someone who has had a very different career trajectory since she played. So in terms of both Laurens coming back for a returning season of the US, which I'm sure might be in the pipeline for either of them, she's become like TikTok famous since then, and she's had like a massive career explosion. So that journey would be really interesting for her as a returnee, just generally. So be interested in Lauren Beck, or I think Marianne. It was my pick.
Yeah, I'm leaning, obviously, no surprise, towards Lauren Beck rather than Marianne. I love Marianne as a character this last season. Obviously, I love the character's larger-than-life personality.
Yeah.
I think she's such a nice person from what I can tell, just in general. I was so happy for her to win. I still wanted Omar to win, and the thing with Survivors, your favorites rarely ever win, but that's okay. Marianne did a really good job. I just think it's too soon for her to come back, especially since she's just won the show. Plus, if I'm looking at the makeup, and also when I'm looking at the makeup of the tribe right now, I feel like we need someone that is going to continue to add a little bit to the physicality of this tribe if we're going to be playing like an Australian version.
I do not think about these things. I'm like, let's send in the people strategy I like, and if they're going to lose challenges, then they're all going to go home. But I did not think about the physical matchups of this tribe at all.
Just off the topic, and I know we're dragging it out on Marianne a little bit, but like I don't think she's right for this one. But what season? Like I'm thinking you'd probably just want to throw her into any season. What season do you think? Yeah, what season? Like I kind of feel like the season that would better fit her, and the one that we're more likely to get in the future is like winners versus runner-ups or winners versus finalists. Is potentially a theme they might dip into in the future, because
that's the vibe South Africa will do and the US will never do.
We'll never do it.
Beautiful fan Reddit theme that the US just aren't thinking of. But why do you think that would be such a good fit for her?
I feel like she would be underestimated with especially more winners there. And I think that would give her the opportunity to get further, where if she's the only winner coming back, like I said, I'm very anti having that's why I kind of leaned away from winners altogether, but you've changed my mind and we've started adding a few to this list. I kind of lean away from winners because I feel like my heart just gets broken seeing players come back as winners and then they get voted out. They've got nowhere to go. They're such a big target. Like Aris is another one for me. I really enjoy, or Aris, if you pronounce it that way, I really enjoy him as well. And obviously coming back in Blood versus Water, he was always going to be a massive threat. And someone like Tyson was always going to try and take him out as soon as he could in a season such as that. And also Tina, coming back that season. I just feel like there's, I kind of like having this perfect view of a winner and not seeing them come back and stay in their record. And maybe that's a me problem, not a them problem, if that makes sense.
I feel like for me, it's the opposite, where I feel like once a winner wins, that's cemented for me forever. Like JT barely even ruined his record because I'm like, well, you still did token teams. Like that still existed, is valid, even though he torpedoed that over the next 2 seasons. Like for me, like that, it doesn't make me, I don't know. I guess like Kagia Tony into Game Changers Tony really did make me sad. So I guess it does make me sad. But in this perfect world, those things aren't going to happen. For me, it's not necessarily about seeing winners go because I have won $1 million, but like seeing any legend go, whether they've won or lost, and when I love them, that'll always hurt badly. So maybe we should change this whole cast into just a bunch of people we don't like, and then the season can't hurt us emotionally. But I see it. I think for Marianne, the biggest thing for me is that she has just won. So I don't know when the season is, but let's say it's imminent. I want some time for her because she's also really young and she still did so much well and was really aware. But I think even Marianne a few years down the track for me is a fascinating concept. So as much as I want her on everything, I'm willing to give it a little bit more time. So I think let's throw in Lauren Beck, kind of like the end of the last era of the US of US Survivor before we got to all winners. And
All right,
yeah, I think that
we've
okay,
got all our women. So we've got
we're
Lauren,
bargaining
Beck, Surrey
well.
Fields,
Yeah.
Angelina Keeley, and Nina as the wild card in this one. Got Rick and Omar as locks on the men. But let's move to one of the franchises we haven't spoken about in a while. I think we did really well in South Africa in the beginning here. You mentioned Chappies earlier on. Is there any doubt? Both of us will probably have him, I would
Yeah.
assume. Like Chappies is Survivor South Africa at this stage. Would you disagree with that?
Yeah, I think Chappies defines what Survivor South Africa currently is. He was the fan favorite last season. He's coming back. Who knows how it will go? But I do think that he again also has that international connection. I know that he's been like chatting with Luke and stuff. I think that that will be crazy to see them on the same season together. He's also really entertaining and definitely interested in what will be, the second and then maybe with this one third round for Chappies. But just in terms of like representing the franchise and bringing that wild card element, he's extremely fun. So yeah, he was my other pick. So I think we've done really well. We've done what we have. So we have Jacques, Chappies, Rob Bentley, and Werner. We did it.
Yeah. So we did it for the men. It's done.
We don't
so
have any women though, except Alessa. Yeah.
Alessa's the only woman. So I'll give you the two women that I had here that I think we haven't spoken about yet. Inesu was my winner pick last season, and I would like to see her come back now. For me with Inesu, I just think even when I looked at last season's cast, in my mind, I had it. If you had to replay that season like 100 times, who would have one of the highest strike rates in winning? And I think Anessa would be one of those people that would do extremely well. She's very sociable. She's someone that I think connected with a lot of people very well. It was probably like, sometimes in Survivor, your strengths become your weaknesses. And it was probably one of her weaknesses that she was so good connecting with different people that someone like a Karan saw that as a threat and he needed to take her out in that season. But I love her vibe. I think she's, again, someone that would be representative of South Africa as a country. And I think that that's really important on a season such as this as well. And, anytime I get the opportunity to put Anesu in a cast, I probably will, because I was really sad not to see her in this season.
And then who was the second one?
The second person is Santuni. And again, Santuni is just such a big character. How can you not have her in the season? Like Santuni and Chappies for me, and Anesu, surprise, surprise.
Yeah, that's a
all
lot.
Three of them. They were just the alliance that I wanted to win that didn't win.
Yeah, I mean, having all three of them, I feel like is a lot. Like that whole alliance. Because I also have Santini, so I feel like lock that in. She also has connections to Australian Survivor. I know that she's watching. Like she again, like this is the thing. I'll have like the nerdy, clear, obvious super fan, and then I'll have like more of a secret super fan who's more of the character pick, but is still like a great player and like this like hardcore strategist like Pia, Werner, Santini, huge fans, huge international crossover without being like the clear young nerd, which is the archetype that I love. So I think for Santini, I know a lot of people were upset not to see her on SA9. She's a clear returnee pick. She's an icon. She represents the franchise. Lock her in from entertainment perspective, from game perspective, from crossover perspective, 100%. My issue with Vanessa was then that you have like the whole Operation Destiny alliance, like all three of them on the same tribe. I'll give you my other pick. So I had Jean Michel. I know she couldn't be on SA9, so this gives her that opportunity. She's a huge fan of international. She's a huge super fan as well. And I feel that, even I remember Werner and her talking in their deep dives from SA6 about how she would kind of like impersonate JLP. So like, don't you really, really want like Jean there impersonating JLP? Like that's just incredible TV. She's a great character. She's great entertainment. I'd love to see her again after SA6 and just think like, what can she do? Like she learned some lessons into kind of how she was playing the game. I think she played better. I think she's so fun. I really want Jean and I want Santini. So those for me are the two picks. And then we can kind of talk about the other one if it's going to be Anesu. I had another pick, but yeah.
I'm going to do what you did to me earlier when we were negotiating here. I'm willing to give you John, but then you have to give me Steffi because we need physicality in this tribe so that they can compete with the other tribes. Because if you're going to have both Santini and John in the same tribe, you're going to have to balance that out somehow.
We have Rob Bentley and Chappies.
I know, but still, like you need some strong. Like
Rob Bentley and Chappies are going to carry this tribe on their back. Like
imagine like some of the cast going up against like Haley going up against these women. Like I feel like we need to have at least one. So far, like who do we have for women? We've got.
Well, yeah.
I feel like we need it.
Yeah, I don't. So we've got Palessa, Jean
Which other
Asante.
physical woman can we put in, like, that you think would be a great
Okay,
representative? Oh, I don't want to do Nicole for Rob's season because the reason is that I don't want Rob and Nicole to have that's too strong of an alliance. And I know that they're very good friends even outside of the game right now, where I feel like they would just take off where they left off.
okay. Well, my other pick was Marion, but that's obviously not a physical pick. She's a huge fan. I kind of wanted to
Yes.
represent the pre-reboot seasons. That was something that I wanted to give a little bit of voice to. But I guess like she's an SA
Marisha?
Niner.
Would you want Marisha
I think
instead
we
of
can do
Steffi? Because I
better.
feel like
I mean, Steffi, I would rather do Nicole. Like for me, if we can't do Marion because we're looking at physicality, if we need that physical element, I'd rather do Nicole because I feel like she's a better character. I feel like she's close to Rob, but like you're getting Santini Chappies, and in your mind and Ness, you're like all three of them. We've got a
am I
lot
getting
of
Anesu?
allies coming back.
Is that what you're
We
saying?
have
You're giving me Anesu for
Well, no, I'm just saying that if Nicole's problem is that she's gonna be with Rob, like you were willing to do
yes.
Santini Chappies and Anesu. We have Haley and George. Like
Yeah.
I was willing to do Marianne and Oma. Like I don't know. Like I'm like it'll be fine. We'll have these connections. I mean, I
Yes.
sometimes think having connections can be thrilling. Having
Well, you kind
Natalie
of convinced
and
me because
Jeremy, like that was painful, but it was compelling.
you kind of convinced me in a way, and this is what happens when you like, yeah, I guess come up with the cast and it's like a brainstorming session live on the podcast at the same time. But where you kind of convinced me is that if Rob was to come back, he would have that big of a target on his back that he probably would need an ally in the game. So based on that, I don't think it's too much of an advantage. But then again, in saying that, there is the hidden alliance of Chappies and Rob as well. Like Chappies would be
Yeah,
set
I
up
was
pretty well in
thinking.
a game
Yeah.
such as this. But
Rob is
you know
set
what?
up well in this imaginary season. But I think
Yes.
Nicole brings the physicality that you want while also being an incredible character, while also not being a three-time player, which Steffi would be at that point. She wasn't able to be on this cast. I know a lot of people really wanted her to be, but she was a finalist. Like, I mean, I guess poor Jacques. Like, it's not a great situation for Jacques walking into it, but I would way rather have Nicole as a character than Steffi on this cast. And I think that it makes a lot more sense in terms of also like representing South Africa, like Rob and Nicole together do. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm
So
happy with
that's
that.
South
So we've
Africa.
got
Did we do it?
I think we've got it. We've got the full cast. I think let's have a look. So we've got Chappies, we've got Vanner, Rob, and Jark for the men. And then for the females, we've got Nicole, John, Santini, and Palessa. We've done it.
Cool.
Look at us.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that. We needed a little bit of physicality. So I'm happy to give you Nicole on that spot there and maybe help Rob out a little bit. I've got a feeling that Rob would do well in a season such as this again. But we're going to go over to the Australian team where we still have to make a few decisions. So far, to recap, we've got George, we've got Luke, and then for the women, we've got Sam, Sarah, and Pia. So we need one more woman.
And
And
Haley.
we need and
We've done
Haley.
the
Sorry,
women.
you're right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we've done the women. Sorry, you're right. So we need on this, what do we need? We need George and Luke. So we've still got two men that we need to choose from here.
Yeah.
And I'll go in first. And this is someone that, again, my bias is showing a little bit, but I would hope that there is people that watched Australian Survivor that enjoyed him as much as I did on his seasons. You could probably argue that maybe having Pia on the season have changed things a little bit around now. So I could concede this if we needed to, but I'd love to see Dirty Harry back on the show again. I really enjoyed him again. Similar to Jark, he's a player that plays well from the bottom. He's a scrappy player. I mean, he had the nickname the Cockroach for a reason in his season and managed to survive a lot longer than what he had the right to do so in that season. And then again, when he came back in All-Stars, I felt like he was, dealt a little bit of a bad hand as one of the more dominant players from the season just before. Not much of a break in between seasons. He wasn't mentally really in it, but he still did pretty well. There's classic moments of him wanting to play in advantage, AK on the spot telling him don't play it, and him having to make a decision not to play it on the spot and having some good reads. So he's someone that I enjoy on the show. So I've got him, and I'll also give you another person here so we can talk about two people at the same time. I've got Benji from Champs vs. Contenders 1. Now, the thing with Benji, rumor has it that he's not that involved in the Survivor community anymore and that he probably won't want to come back.
But this is a fantasy season.
But this is a fantasy season. Exactly.
Yeah.
And he's just somebody that I think was one of the biggest players we haven't seen come back yet in the show. So I think those two are kind of similar in a lot of ways. Benji, maybe at this point, you could argue, maybe as someone that fans would want to see more because he hasn't been back where Harry has.
Yeah, I mean, Benji was definitely a really unfortunate loss from All Stars and Blood versus Water. Like both of those seasons would have been brilliant for Benji for a few different reasons.
Mm,
And I think it's been pretty tricky. I did have Harry on my list, but my list was also too long because I couldn't decide. These are the other names that I had. I had Harry and Nick, and I know that you wouldn't probably have both because they kind of occupy the same space in like a very limited capacity. This is why I asked us to do 8 and not 6, by the way, because I was struggling to even get it to 8 per try. But I had Harry and Nick, obviously Nick being a good friend, and Harry, I'm biased in that way. They absolutely fill the archetype that I love and would really do well with that international crossover. They know everyone. They have the relationships. Nick and Devons and all of these players like LaRue gets them to send videos before the season and, pump them up, which is really cool. I also
that's
had
cool.
David. I just think in
David
terms of
Gennard.
in terms of like representing Australian Survivor as a player, as a character, as an icon, like he's up there with Luke and George in being just basically representing the season. I think that the whole franchise, I think that he has had relationships with, I think he's also spoken to Chappies. I think Chappies is already pre-gaming for this non-existent season. Obviously, he's had these relationships. And I think that he is American, so that would be an interesting note where he's obviously playing for Australian Survivor, but he's American. A lot of people have wanted him on US Survivor. Because I think that there's like a dual citizenship thing there, and it'd be really interesting to see how that would go as someone who has lived in America for a long time, but is both American and Australian. So I feel like David, and then I was choosing between Nick and Harry, and I couldn't make the decision because it was personal and hard, and they both deserve to be there. But if you already had Harry on your list, I'm happy to go with Harry and David. Benji's an interesting option. Like if you want to kind of reduce the legendary a bit and take out David, Benji's obviously someone I'd love to see return, and I'd love to see a little bit more representation from season 1 and season 3 because we're kind of sticking around season 2, season 4, season 6, and now the last season where like all our picks are from. So I'd kind of love to extend that out a little bit, but I just feel like if I'm comparing David to Benji, it's an unfair and a difficult comparison between like one of the biggest icons that the global show has ever seen, and Benji, who's an amazing, amazing character and a really great player and someone I'd love to see again, but I just don't know that I can now fit him into what is like basically like the Mount Rushmore of male Australian Survivor players as we're trying to kind of work out our cast.
Yeah, and I think what makes this very difficult for anybody that's listening to this at this point is that we've already got 2 winners for Australia at the moment in PR and both Haley. So David would make it a 3rd winner, and we haven't really we could have gone. I think if you wanted to make it more like equal and you had some more winners or that level of player in there, you could have easily said, okay, well let's put Graham in from Survivor South Africa. Let's put someone like a Nicole Wilmans in, for instance, instead of the other Nicole. And you could look at the US and put maybe like your Adams in there, and maybe
I feel like
I feel like it's kind of.
So.
And I kind of feel like it's leaning that way at the moment. And I'm like I'm like the one person here that's preventing Shannon from just throwing winners at this thing at this point.
Yeah, we're like the opposite of the production stuff where you're like, all these twists. And I'm like, no. And I'm like, but every legendary player ever, let's get Sandra and Sari and Tony, let's just do it. And you're like, no, we're trying to have a little bit of nuance to this cast. It's not just like basically ranking our favorite players from every franchise. So,
and I love David. I'm the biggest. Like, I mean, Luke is like my favorite Australian player. I love David. I love Dirty Harry. There's King George, for instance, and we already have him on this cast. I do feel like it maybe would be a little bit heavy-handed, but in saying that, I think if the actual season ever happens, David Gennard's a lock. Like he's a definite lock. He would definitely be in that cast, but doesn't mean that we have to do it in this cast based on how it's shaken up so far. I'm kind of leaning towards let's give Benji a shot here because he hasn't been back on. And I kind of feel like you gave me an out by saying, hey, if you want to replace him with Benji because we haven't had some of the earlier seasons represented as of yet, maybe do that. But in saying that, I know some fans are going to probably tweet at us or message us angry that we didn't put David Gennard in this list. I'm the biggest David Gennard fan, and I could easily see David Gennard replacing like someone on this cast. It is so tough when you've only got 4 men that you can put on, though. It's not easy.
Yeah. I mean, look at where David would be. He'd be with Harry, who he's played with. Luke, we'd have David and Luke reunited with Pia and Sarah, who he's friends with. Like, there's so many parts to this that he would be like very connected. I don't know if it would be good or bad. I feel like having the season without David is crazy, but we have other legends from other franchises that are not on this. Like, this isn't a legend season. It is international. It's like, War of the Worlds. It's a crossover. We want to represent the franchise as well, and not having David feels like maybe we're not, but at the same time, we're also not looking to just basically be like, here's our 4 best men and women from every franchise go at it and may the best country win. Like, that's not really what we're looking at. So, I mean, I'm happy to go with Benji and kind of represent season 3 a little bit more. If we're gonna get added, like, don't at me about David. Like, he's definitely on my list. And I do think, like, I also kind of think, like, is David a little bit past the franchise? Like, is he moving on a little bit because he has won, he's played twice. We'd have him here as like as a 2-time player and a winner, as compared to like Haley and Pia who've played once, and like how are they going to go after winning that first time. So okay, let's put Benji in. And in a world where David wanted to do this somehow in this dream season, like, we'd never say no to him, so someone would get bumped. Like, that's just how it would be. Like, he'd be on his own tribe because we'd never say no to David.
And we're not publicly going to say who's that person that's going to get bumped because we don't want to make anybody upset at us here on this podcast. But I'm sure someone will probably get bumped if David wanted to play it.
It'll be 25 players. Yeah.
I feel like David's one of those players that we'll see on the challenge soon, the Challenge Australia or something like that. I know they're casting at the moment, but he would kind of potentially fit in really well in that and what they're trying to do with the battle of the reality TV stars. And I think that, if they didn't reach out to him, bad on them for not reaching out, I think, at this point, because they're losing out on a top tier character. But I kind of also feel like Luke and David, like I don't know if you can have both of them on the season, even though I know everybody would love to see that. I just think that
and it was so much fun.
But they were so dominant. They were so they got into a minority position.
But let's put that against Rob Bentley and see how it goes. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's.
Yeah.
But it would be a lot. It would be a lot for everyone. Like, I just saved them from getting beaten up in a challenge by Steffi, but then I'm putting them against Luke and David. Like, it's gonna be difficult for the players. So, all right.
Happy we both got Harry.
He was on my list. Yeah. So I think it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
All right. So I think we're done with Australia then as well. Let me have a look. Yep, we're done.
Australia, so we Luke, George, Harry, Benji.
Yes,
and then
that's
Haley, Pia, Sarah, Sam.
Yes.
Well, that really
I bet you didn't come into this podcast thinking Sam was going to get casted, though. That's probably like the one that's like the biggest surprise for you in the cast and how.
Well, I just hadn't thought of it. Like, I love Sam. Like, she won the Shizzy. I love her as a person and a player. I don't know if there's a little bit of time needed, but I'd be interested for her to play an international season and have an international audience kind of understand what they're dealing with, because I think that she's incredible. I just hadn't thought a lot about her return since that, like, kind of emotionally draining of Blood versus Water. Yes. I think it needs to happen, and I love her playing individually, so I think it's a great pick.
All right, so we're back to the USA. We've got 2 more male picks that we need to make here, and I know you're going to put up Adam as one of the people that you'd like to see back. I'm going to put up another person to consider here as a counter, because we leave Adam on the table for now, and I guess Dom is another person that we've kind of got as a maybe, and Bryce. So there's a few people here. I want to give you the one person from my list that we haven't spoken about yet, and I don't know how you feel about them, but I would like to see Malcolm come back again. And I know that some people are over the whole Aussie, Malcolm, Joey, that type of archetype out there. I've always looked at Malcolm as very different to those two, even though he gets compared to both Aussie and Joey a lot of the times. I feel like he's the most strategic one out of the 3 of them. And I also like the fact that he is a big move player. So, for instance, the whole thing he did with the Amigos when he played the Idols, and maybe played it a little bit too early, needed to keep things a little bit closer to his vest, but he's not afraid of taking risks and so forth. And I always felt really bad about the way that he went out in Game Changers, where I just thought that, JT took him down with the ship there, and it was, not really much he could have done. In any other circumstance, he probably would have been okay leading into the merge there that season. So, again, he's a player that I would like to see back. And, again, he would be a 4th-time returnee. So I could understand if there's other players we would want to see more than him. But I would kind of argue that, we've seen Adam twice now as well. I know Adam's got the whole international thing, and I love Adam so much. You've got to understand, Adam, Winners of War, was probably, outside of Tony, my favorite player. Like, I just loved him on that season and how hard he played. He was such a different player compared to his first season, and the fact that he had the courage, which a lot of people would not have had, to go up to Boston Rob and to try and tell Boston Rob what to do. I absolutely stand the fact that he had the courage to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point we kind of need a US winner. Like,
Yes, because we've got winners.
Yeah, now like to the point you didn't want any winners, and it's now got to the point where we need more winners because there's like now they're represented kind of in the other franchises. I think for Adam, like this is just a perfect theme for him. Like the other people we're talking about could all come back on other seasons and be incredible. Like, and maybe it's not the right place for Bryce. Like maybe Bryce needs the Return of the Outcast US equivalent. And in my dream version of that, he's the number one pick. I think for Dom as well, like we very much have represented new school US very well. In some of the other players, so kind of that space is taken up, and I don't know that this is like really the space for him. Adam, like if you were to tell me like who do I want back the most, like who do I need to see the most from those 4 players, like Adam might be last, because I just saw him and he's played twice in a small amount of time. I just think that like he and Palesa, they define the season, like just from a marketing perspective of the fact that he did that. Like he put International Survivor on the map if you knew what he was doing. Like that through line through from the Palesa Idol to him trying to do that in Winners at War, the biggest US season, it's just too perfect for me to ignore. So like while I want Dom back, definitely, I want Bryce back desperately. You know, I'll talk about Malcolm because I'd love to see Malcolm back. I kind of feel like Adam for me still remains number one for this particular season where we can't have every legendary US player or every modern US player who hasn't had a chance or every US player we want to see because it's just like way too big a field to narrow down to this. I'm really looking at like how is it relevant to the theme, and like Adam defines the theme and he's a winner. So I feel really strongly about Adam. I'm willing to give you a pick. I think Malcolm is an interesting one for me. I hadn't thought about it. I love Malcolm. He's the reason I'm a super fan. That Philippines Caramoan double, I was so obsessed with Malcolm that's why I went down the rabbit hole of going from basically a hardcore casual to a super fan. And I'm always keen to see him back. So like I think that would be good because he would represent, if we have Suri as in terms of like, not that he's at the level of Suri, but like in terms of like an icon that everyone should know, I think Malcolm does bring that. So I think that he would be a good pick. Definitely, like we need a little bit of justice after game changes for a few people. That's its own season. Is just who are we getting justice for post game changes, and how are they coming back to redeem not even themselves, but just a situation.
What if it's like the whole thing with Tony coming back after game changes and getting justice, and there's just like this roll-on effect of players from game changes coming back and getting justice? It would be such a cool thing to see Malcolm come back and actually win or go deep and just once again prove how good of a player he is. And, you know, Suri coming back potentially in this season doing extremely well. I think that would be so cool. But one of the things I do want to point out, because I kind of took that as a yes, Malcolm is a potential option here.
If Adam, if you're willing to do with Adam.
Yeah. Like, well, I've already on my side, I've put Adam on the season because I do agree with you. We need a winner. The one thing I do want to point out, we've got Adam, Rick Devens, and Omar all on the same tribe to represent the men. Going into some of the challenges, if it's Australian challenges, so physical, it's going to be one thing. I hope that Adam is hitting the gym. You know, when he's listening to this podcast, get ready, Adam. You need to be eating a lot of protein. You know, go for your morning runs, get in shape because you're going to have to carry the weight of this team on your back as the only winner in this tribe when you go back. But listen, I'm a big Adam fan, so it doesn't take too much to convince me. I want to keep Omar in it. I want to keep Rick Devens in it. Will the actual season look like this? I very much doubt if like one of the channels got a hold of this tribe. They'd be like, yes, we're happy to have Adam, Rick, and Omar all in one tribe. I love all of them individually, but I kind of feel like they're the same almost archetype, you know? So I feel like they would want a little bit more diversity.
But Lauren and Nina are strong. So.
Yes. Oh, well, we somehow managed to do this. So at some point, what I'll do is I'll put a little thing together where we can have, this is the team that we think would represent what does fans think about it. I'm sure there will be people that will absolutely hate our selections because we didn't put their favorite in here. But I think the whole point of this podcast and the reason I wanted to talk to you about it is just to generate a little bit of excitement around International Survivor and also just to sort of put it out there that legitimately we could have 3 or 4 different casts, especially from the USA side. I think the Australian side as well, and even South Africa, they're so good at casting. Like I feel like there's so many different variations of casts that you could put together that would make for a very entertaining show of International Survivor. And I know both me and you as big international fans, we want to see this season happen.
Yeah, sorry. Now I'm just like thinking through the physicality of this. I was like, who's going to get crushed? I feel like the Survivor South Africa team, once we put Nicole Kappa there, actually are going to completely destroy everyone else. Like they've got Chappies and Rob Bentley, and like now I'm playing it out in my mind. But then you've got like Haley and I don't know. Maybe we'll have to see how it goes in this non-existent season. But no, thank you so much for having me. I love generating some fun and excitement around International Survivor. Like the casting, especially for like Survivor South Africa and through a lot of Australian Survivor, then obviously we have a lot of scope in US Survivor, but has been so phenomenal. And there's so much opportunity to have these great players come back. So I would love to see it. I don't think our cast will be where a network would necessarily go with it, but there's so many good options. And there's like a lot of international players who are interested in these other franchises, connecting with them, watching it, which is so fun. So
Yeah.
hopefully it happens. Hopefully we've come up with something that is something of a middle ground that people would enjoy. But I really enjoyed the conversation myself. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, guys, if you're listening to this on any audio platform or if you're on YouTube, please in the comments let us know who you would
Be
have picked. Who
kind.
did we? Yeah, who did we miss out on? Understand that. Listen, we love most of the players probably that you're going to put out there, but if you're on
We
this side
agree.
trying to put a cast together, yeah, we agree with all of them. It's
It's
not
really
the easiest
hard.
thing to try and put a tribe together and to put our necks out
Impossible.
there and say, listen, this is the tribe we'd like to see go out there and play the game. But Shannon, thank you so much for coming on. For those people who don't know who you are, maybe they're new school fans to Survivor. I've got a lot of people who listen to my channel who are challenge fans as well. So they might be getting into Survivor now with so many Survivor players coming over to the Challenge USA for the first time ever, and they might decide to get into it. Where can they find you and listen to more content? And can you sort of let them know what you're working on? This will probably drop either this weekend or mid next week. So sort of with that in mind, what can people look out for?
Yeah, you can follow me at Shannon Gates on all platforms. That's GAITZ. You can subscribe to the International Survivor Hap-Ups feed, which is where I podcast about all International Survivor, US, Australia, and South Africa. So at the moment, we're doing the Survivor South Africa preseason. We have exclusive preseason interviews with the players one day out before they play the game. So myself and Mike Bloom are doing that at the moment. We at this time have done one interview podcast and a kickoff special before that. And then I think tomorrow we'll be recording our second one. So that will have dropped by the time that you're listening to this. And those are a lot of fun. The first interview podcast was 3 hours and 45 minutes, getting through 5 of the interviews, and we give our commentary as well. We're having a lot of fun with that. So please do follow along. We'll be recapping the season every week when it's on from July 19th, July 18th in South Africa. And we will be having exit interviews hopefully as well. So a lot of content happening, obviously, for Australian Survivor and the US. I'm doing that too, also on Talking Tribal. But we're not currently in season for that. So that's why we get to do fun things like this when there's a little bit of a break. But thank you so much again for having me. Hope everyone enjoyed it. And yeah, follow along and always reach out if you're more interested in International Survivor. DM me, where can I watch? All those questions. Always happy to answer. And I hope everyone gets more involved if you've seen only a couple of the franchises and want to jump onto the third, so that you will eventually fully understand this international crossover season that's definitely going to happen. Then yeah, just let me know.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Shannon. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today about this. I know you're really busy, and hopefully we get to do this sometime again in the future.
Thanks so much, Chris.